You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former Government Minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. I will be with you 3 till 6. It's a firecracker of a first hour, ladies and gents. We're going up here because Suella Braverman, this is one to watch throughout the course of the show. Is this a civil service stitch-up, or has she done wrong, and does she need to go? I'll be delving into the latest on that. Keep your eyes and ears on it all show. We're also going to be talking about this ahead of Thursday's supposedly disastrous account of our net migration figures and illegal immigration figures. I'm looking at whether or not we are too reliant on immigration economically, and an important day for some very tragic reasons, OK? Because we're going to be remembering 2 devastating terror attacks, the Manchester Arena bomb and the slaughter of Fusilier Lee Rigby. And I will be asking what lessons, if any, have we learned to try to make sure they don't happen again. And finally, this broke just moments ago. There's going to be a new search in the hunt for Madeleine McCann. I will have all of the details on that for you in just a matter of minutes. Patrick Christys on GB News. Yes, we have a new email address for you to get your heads around today, ladies and gentlemen. It's gbviews@gbnews.com. So not .co.uk, it's .com. So get your emails flooding in on that. The Suella one is big, I think. She's just been speaking in the House of Commons. Do you think that Suella Braverman might be about to fall victim to a civil service stitch-up, or has she done wrong and needs to go? gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, though, here's your headlines.
Hello, good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 3. I'm Tamsin Roberts. Police investigating the disappearance of Madeleine McCann are reportedly set to launch a major search in Portugal. Local media saying a remote reservoir on the Algarve, which the main suspect in the case used to visit, has become a key focus of their inquiries. The area is about 30 miles from the resort in Praia de Luz, where she went missing 16 years ago. The suspect is currently in jail in Germany for 5 sexual offences committed in Portugal between 2000 and 2017. The search, due to start tomorrow, is expected to last for 2 days. The Home Secretary says she's confident there was nothing untoward in the way she handled a speeding offence. Suella Braverman is under pressure over a possible breach of the ministerial code following claims she asked for help in arranging a private speed awareness course. The Prime Minister has spoken to his ethics advisor about the matter, but it's understood no formal inquiry has yet been launched. Speaking for the first time about the row, the Home Secretary didn't deny asking civil servants for assistance.
Last summer, I was speeding. I regret that. I paid the fine and I took the points. But we're focused now on delivering for the British people and working for them.
Did you ask civil servants to put you on a one-on-one speeding course?
In relation to the process, I'm focused on delivering for the British people, do my job as Home Secretary. What I will say is that, in my view, I'm confident that nothing untoward has happened.
Well, the Shadow Public Health Minister, Andrew Gwynne, says she needs to go.
I've got real frustration here about this because at a time of a cost of living crisis that people want real answers to, at the time that our NHS is on its knees and needs fixing, we're here yet again talking about another Tory minister who has sought to bend the rules, play the system for their own advantage. Of course she needs to face an ethics advisor. I would go further. I think Rishi Sunak needs to show some leadership and show her the door.
Labour has warned the NHS won't survive 5 more years of a Conservative government. Setting out his vision for the health service, Sir Keir Starmer promised to get the NHS back on its feet if his party wins the next election. He pledged to reduce NHS waiting lists, committed to hit the 4-hour A&E target and improve ambulance response times by 2030.
At the next election, the NHS is on the line. The Conservative Party that's brought it to its knees will put it in the ground. But mark my words, if all we do in the Labour Party is to place the NHS on a pedestal and leave it there, that's not good enough either. We've got to fix the fundamentals, renew its purpose, make it fit for the future.
Calls are being made for every work-related suicide to be investigated by the Health and Safety Executive. It follows the death of head teacher Ruth Perry, who took her own life in January. Her family believes she was stressed because of an Ofsted inspection. Writing in the British Medical Journal, 2 academics say the profession has a duty to demand action to tackle the burden of mental health. Russia's Wagner group of mercenaries has announced plans to leave Ukraine's eastern city of Bakhmut. The group's founder says forces will retreat from the 25th of May until the 1st of June. It's after Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky dismissed claims by the paramilitary organisation that it had successfully taken the city. A warning's being issued over a number of new sophisticated scams. Consumer group Which says at least 4 are doing the rounds. They include fake PayPal and missing person appeals, fraudulent app alerts and pig butchering, which was given its name because fraudsters so-called fatten up the victim by forming a romantic connection before executing the financial part of the scam. The government plans to work with Ofcom to use new technology to clamp down on the spoofing of legitimate phone numbers. Nearly a third of young survivors of the Manchester Arena bombing received no professional support, with a report finding their experiences weren't validated by adults in positions of care. 22 people were killed when a suicide bomber detonated his device at the Ariana Grande concert 6 years ago. The Be the Difference report showed 3/4 of children at the event were mentally affected by the attack, but professional support wasn't offered to 4 in 10 of them. The average house price has reached a record high. Property website Rightmove says the figure jumped by just over £6,500 in May, pushing the average price in Britain to almost £373,000. The company says the number of people making inquiries is 3% higher than in 2019, but buyer affordability remains stretched. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is a massively action-packed show today. I just want to start by setting my stall out on a story that I think is going to dominate today's show and quite possibly into tomorrow and the day after as well, and it's Suella Braverman, isn't it? So, does anybody else think that the Suella Braverman controversy feels a little bit like it could be a civil service and left-wing media witch hunt? She was caught speeding, fine, so was the Archbishop of Canterbury. It's a normal thing. It's easily done. Now, like everybody else, she's then offered the choice of doing a group speed awareness course or taking points on her licence and a fine. She wanted to do a speed awareness course and reportedly asked civil servants if she could do one privately, presumably for 2 reasons. Firstly, she wouldn't have wanted to be recognised and for that story to get out, which I think we can all agree has catastrophically backfired. Secondly, Because she is arguably the most difficult job in government, and stopping the boats and reducing catastrophic net migration numbers is definitely more important for the nation than her being lectured to about driving more slowly. But the headlines initially were, Home Secretary tries to dodge points on licence and fine. Well, that makes it sound corrupt and illegal, doesn't it? Which is absolute rubbish. Every single person who does a speed awareness course is trying to avoid getting points on their licence. That's the point of them, isn't it? Well, for me, the bigger story is about what appears to be yet another civil service leak against a right-wing government minister. How on earth did this info all get out there? The story really should be about our civil service potentially trying to bring down people they ideologically oppose. Dominic Raab had to suffer tons of completely false civil service leaks, which he came out and spoke about, before being ousted over his conduct, despite apparently never shouting or swearing at anyone and having to work with someone who essentially nearly handed Gibraltar back to the Spanish. Boris Johnson was ousted after a steady drip-feeding of leaks by civil servants, and Sue Gray is facing serious questions about her alleged connections to the Labour Party while she was looking into Partygate. And now, presumably, some civil servant has said that Suella asked them to look into whether or not she could do a private speed awareness course. And there are calls for her to go. There is a pretty clear picture emerging here, is there not? For all this talk of whether or not Suella has broken the ministerial code, and we'll have to wait and see on that, of course we will. But shouldn't there be a bit more talk about whether or not our civil service is impartial, and whether they are consistently breaking rules by leaking often false claims to the media in a bid to remove democratically elected people that they don't like from office? I think it's worth having a conversation about that. If a civil servant is found to have leaked information to the press, should they not be sacked? Look, this is going to be a massive talking point today, tomorrow, possibly into the next day as well. I want to hear what you think, though. You can email me, and it's this new email address. It's not particularly difficult to wrap your heads around, to be fair. gbviews@gbnews.com, so not the .co.uk.com. Get your views coming in on this. But Suella Braverman has been asked whether she'd spoken to civil servants about putting her on a one-to-one speed awareness course. Now, she wouldn't address that directly, but she said that she's confident that nothing untoward has happened.
Well, first and foremost, I'm focused on the priorities for the British people as Home Secretary. That's cutting serious crime with more police officers, that's standing up for victims of child sexual abuse, it's about stopping the boats, and I'm not going to take a backward step from working on those issues. In relation to your question, last summer I was speeding, I regret that. I paid the fine and I took the points. But we're focused now on delivering for the British people and working for them.
Did you ask civil servants to put you on a one-on-one speeding course?
In relation to the process, I'm focused on delivering for the British people, do my job as Home Secretary. What I will say is that, in my view, I'm confident that nothing untoward has happened.
Would you welcome an investigation into this? Have you spoken to the Prime Minister? Would you welcome one?
As I said, I'm focused on working as Home Secretary. That's why I'm here. I've met with victims today. I'm making a big announcement today. I'd appreciate the focus on an announcement which is standing up for victims and survivors. In relation to the speeding tickets and my fine and points, I'm very confident
Very finally on this, Prime Minister, but this is really important because you've broken rules before. You've had to resign for breaking the ministerial code. You've admitted now to breaking or having a speeding fine. You've accused of breaking the code for a second time. How good a look is it for a senior politician, one of the most senior politicians in the country, to be viewed as a constant rule breaker?
I got a speeding ticket. I paid the fine. I took the points. In my view, nothing untoward has happened. Thank you.
OK, there we go. Well, I'm joined now by GB News' political editor. I think you could hear a little bit of Darren McCaffrey's outside the steps of Downing Street. Darren, what is the very latest? Because this story has just moved on a little bit. She's been addressing the Commons, for example.
Yes, she has been talking in the Commons with MPs posing questions, as they do every month, to the Home Secretary. But as we heard there from Suella Braverman, not really willing to step into this, saying that nothing as untoward has happened. The big decision is actually what happens here. What is the Prime Minister going to do now? He's actually due to leave Downing Street relatively soon as well to go to the Commons to make a statement on the G7 at around 3:30. He's got a decision to make about whether he thinks this story is fundamentally going to go away, whether it's going to blow over, if you like, or whether it is going to dog the Home Secretary, and that's why he needs to ask his ethics advisor to carry out an investigation into it. He met with Laurie Magnuson this morning. He's not reached a decision apparently today. He had a pretty long conversation, we think, with the Home Secretary this lunchtime. And at some point, I think he's going to have to decide whether an investigation needs to take place. Interesting listening to you earlier on about whether this came from civil servants or not. Now, in the end, no one, well, not no one knows, but very, very few people do know. Don't be wrong, though. There are a lot of political people inside Number 10 who were not very happy with what the Home Secretary had to say in her speech last week. Many viewed it as a leadership speech. Least of all, lots of sideswipes at the Prime Minister. So it's entirely possible that this didn't come from an impartial civil servant, but maybe a political actor who does not like the Home Secretary. In saying all of that, Rishi Sunak is in a very difficult position. He clearly does not want to lose another senior minister. As you've rightly pointed out, he's already lost 3. He cannot really afford, or would certainly not be good luck, to lose 4, not least of all his Home Secretary. And he's facing a very, very tricky position later on this week, of course, when we get those net migration figures, which could be at a record high. So really big questions. You know what? Is it the biggest issue in the world? Almost certainly, probably not. As you've rightly pointed out, we're getting down to a fine line of the ministerial code here, though in the end, others would point out rules are rules, and if politicians break the rules, well, then they have to suffer the consequences.
Yeah, Darren, thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey there, GBNews' political editor, and we will be all over this because I know that it has a huge amount of interest for you guys at home, whether you're listening on your radio or online or whatever. And there is a range of views on this. As Darren rightly pointed out, Suella Braverman giving a big tub-thumping speech at last week's National Conservatism conference probably did raise a few eyebrows in Downing Street. And the timing of all of this, I think, seems quite convenient, doesn't it? We've got what is anticipated to be absolutely monstrously large net migration figures and probably illegal migration figures landing on Thursday. So the timing of this, I think, is good for the government trying to get ahead of these and maybe smear Suella Braverman, if indeed that is what they're doing. But I do want to drill down a little bit into the civil service side of it. We don't know exactly where these leaks have come from, but on the basis of recent evidence and, of course, from what we've seen in the nature of what we've seen now, it is reasonable to suggest that clearly, at least at some point, a civil servant has revealed that Suella Braverman spoke to them. And I'm just not sure that that's OK. And so in order to discuss this further and the role of the civil servants in this story, I am joined now, very gratefully so, by Amy Liversidge, who is the Assistant General Secretary of the FDA, which is one of the main civil service unions. Amy, thank you very, very much. It's great to have you on the show. Under any circumstances, would you condone a civil servant leaking information to the press?
Well, we don't know that that's what's happened here. And as your political correspondent was explaining before, there's also lots of politics at play here. What we
I know, but just to say, sorry, under any circumstance, I want to make that very clear. This is not just about this story. Under any circumstance, because we had Dominic Raab recently, who came out and said that there were allegations about him, I think one involving a tomato, for example, which were completely untrue. And he says they were leaked by the civil service. So I just want to drill down. Is it ever OK for a civil servant to leak information to the press?
Well, civil servants aren't allowed to defend themselves publicly, and that's why there are processes in place to raise concerns about ministers' behaviour, and that's what happened with Dominic Raab. And Dominic Raab played a part in that process to defend himself, and he shouldn't have really then, after the fact, when he had an opportunity to defend himself, then play it all out in the media when the civil servants couldn't defend themselves either. And what's clear with this case is the civil servant has gone to the Propriety and Ethics team to say that the Home Secretary has come and asked them to make a request to have this one-on-one course, and that is a clear breach of the ministerial code. So that the
is
civil
it?
servants
What's the breach? Yeah.
Under a duty of they have to comply with the civil service code, so they had to refer it to the Propriety and Ethics team. Aside from that, we don't know how this story has become public.
What's the exact breach of the ministerial code in your view? Then what is it?
Well, the ministerial code is really clear that you need to keep your duties in the public office, so your duties as Home Secretary leading the Home Office, completely separate to your private interests, and you cannot misuse your public office to try and further or advance your private interests. So the fact that she'd asked officials to make the request that to have this one-on-one course means that, you know, from that course provider's point of view, they would see that as an official request from government. So an official request from the Home Office. Now that's a course provider that is providing a course on behalf to the government.
Yeah.
So that puts them in a really difficult position. You know, what happens if they say no? So there's no way
I can understand
without
that.
breaking the civil service code.
I can understand that completely. But you mentioned there the civil service code, and I think that is something I'm really keen to focus on a little bit here. What is the civil service code if a civil servant is found to have leaked something to the press?
So civil servants aren't allowed to leak things to the press, and if there is accusations of that, then there are processes in place. They're employees of the Crown, they're employees of each of their departments, and they should be investigated.
So would you welcome if, in light of what Dominic Raab has said, in light of some of the accusations that Boris Johnson has lobbed out, in light of what potentially, and we don't know, but potentially may have happened here with Suella Braverman, given the veracity with which the civil service is keen to go after the minute details of the ministerial code, would you, as Assistant General Secretary of the FDA, one of the main civil service unions, would you welcome a similar attempt to investigate claims that civil servants had broken their code by leaking stuff to the press?
Well, let's be clear. Dominic Raab was saying all this stuff. He came out with all these things after he was resigned, after he was found with cases to answer against
after an investigation. And this is the key point, though.
Thousands of rapes, and then came out with all these attacks against civil servants who couldn't defend themselves.
I get that.
That is not a reliable witness.
I get that. Well, but I understand all of this, but that obviously all came out after a very thorough and detailed investigation into what were initially allegations. And so if there are allegations in relation to the civil service releasing things to the media, should they not undergo a similar investigation? Because it could undermine the whole fabric of government and democracy, couldn't it, really? If a democratically elected person asks a civil servant something and feels as though they're going to end up having things sometimes erroneously leaked to the press and then potentially facing some kind of investigation and lose their job, it undermines the trust between government and the civil service. And I just want to hear it from you as to whether or not you would welcome investigations into civil service leaks.
If civil servants have done wrong, then they should be investigated for that. That's a bread and butter of a trade union. We represent our members if they're under investigation, as all employees would be the case. But there's no evidence here to say that it's a civil servant that has leaked this information, or that that's even the main part of the story. The main part of the story is that the Home Secretary attempted to use her public office, the power and influence of the Home Office, to attempt to get special treatment that none of us would get. And she's not allowed to do that. That's a breach of the ministerial code. And if the civil servants had have done that, which they didn't, they refused, they would be breaching the civil service code. And she's not allowed to ask them or incite them to try and break the civil service code as well. That's the story here, not... how this information has come to light. That is something that I'm sure, there'll be interest in there and what's happened there. But the main issue...
I think there's massive... To be fair, I look...
What's happened in the initial instant? What's happened?
I absolutely agree with you that there is a story, and probably the main story is the Suella Braverman thing. We're rolling on that all day, and I will be going into the more granular detail of that. I do really also think that you're potentially downplaying a little bit the fear of endless civil service leaks, really. I mean, would you accept some people throwing accusations at the civil service that, when we look at the kind of people who've been deposed, right-wing, anti-mass migration Brexiteers, would you accept that there's at least the appearance, maybe, of some kind of political bias in the civil service?
No, not at all. The civil service is completely impartial. That's the point of the permanent civil service. And, for the FDA, we continually and have repeatedly argued for independent processes to deal with this. So you can take the politics completely out of this process. This is what we were saying around the accusations against Dominic Raab, and this is what we're saying today with these accusations, that the Prime Minister should ask his independent ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus, to conduct an investigation. That's what I would do if I was the Prime Minister. Get that investigation done, find out the facts and find out what's happened, and then you can make a decision. It ends all this speculation.
Amy, look, I really appreciate you coming on and having such a robust discussion as well. Massively appreciated. Take care. That's Amy Liversidge there, easy for me to say her, who's the Assistant General Secretary of the FDA, which is one of the main civil service unions. Get your views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.com. Get loads more on that story on our website as well. Just simply go to gbnews.com, where you will find the best analysis and opinion, as well as the latest breaking news, which we do have rather a lot of coming away in the show, actually, because the net migration figures for 2022 are coming out on Thursday. They could top 700,000. Are we too reliant now on immigration? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Yeah, welcome back. Now, look, shortly I'm going to be remembering 2 devastating terror attacks, the Manchester Arena bombing and, of course, the murder of Fusilier Lee Rigby. I'm also going to be giving you updates as a new search is being launched for Madeleine McCann. So I'll have all of that coming your way very, very shortly. But this show will be a migration special on Thursday. It's the day that the net migration figures for last year will be announced, and they could top 700,000. The Prime Minister has said he's committed to reducing net migration, but interestingly, he hasn't set a target. And today, Tory MP David Simmons, who's the chair, get this, of the all-party parliamentary group on migration, said we need more immigration to fill job vacancies. It's got me wondering, are we now too reliant on immigration? I'm joined by research fellow at the Bow Group, Benjamin Loughnane. Benjamin, great to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much. Are we too reliant on migration?
Well, I'm not too sure about the word reliant, because that sort of implies that it's actually giving us great benefits and that we in somehow are plugging shortages, and that maybe in the long term it's a bad idea, but in the short term it's a good idea. But I actually think in the short term it's not even a good idea. I think that it's, ideological fanatics who love migration who are pushing for this, and they try to say, there's an economic argument for this. But when you actually debate them and you give them the facts and the figures, and you show that actually the net cost of migration to Britain is anywhere between about 4 billion a year and 6 billion a year, depending on how you break down the numbers, they always turn around and say, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Even if it is bad for the economy, it's a moral and good thing to do to let people come here and have a better life. So even if you really, you look at the facts and figures, when you challenge these people, they always say, we don't actually care about the economy. That's just an excuse.
What a lot of people, I think, don't get, Benjamin, as well, is that, for example, the best example, I think, is on the student visa situation, because it is often presented as absolute fact that, all of these people go back after they've studied. But the actual Office for National Statistics is pretty clear about this, that they don't have accurate figures on how many people stay. They're allowed to work when they stay. They're allowed to bring dependents as well. So that actually is an unknown, OK? So for people who hide behind the fact that we may have 600,000 students coming every single year, we don't know really how many of them stay and how many of them go home. But, Benjamin, I think many people will be scratching their heads and going, if we have net migration between the 700,000 and 1 million mark, how on earth have we got any gaps in our NHS, in our care sector, or with people like fruit pickers?
Yeah, it is a big question, but just to go back to what you said about the students, it's all well and good if you're going to, say, a Russell Group University or Oxford or Cambridge, or you're doing a proper degree, you come over for 3 years and then you leave. The other thing that we have a lot of Mickey Mouse degrees. We have institutions which are set up, which are eligible for these student visas, and they aren't really proper educational establishments. They are paths in where people can come in and do a sort of a fairly meaningless course of study, and then they overstay, they bring their family. That loophole needs to be closed. We really need to tighten up who's being allowed to apply for these visas, and what institutions are accredited and which ones are allowed. And we need to be clear that if these people are working while they're studying, they will have their visa removed. If they are found to be working at all, they're getting sent back. And we need to get really tough on this, because at the moment it's being massively abused.
I suspect that it is. And there will be a lot of people who say, look, we have labour gaps to plug in our NHS, in our care sector, etc. There appears to be not a huge amount of evidence, given the numbers, that all of these people are coming in and plugging those gaps, which does, of course, raise serious questions about exactly what kind of jobs people are doing. The illegal migration numbers are set to drop on Thursday as well, which is one of the main reasons we're going so big on it. Because, Benjamin, consistently now, for decades, people have voted to reduce migration, and they've forgiven mostly the Conservative Party, time and time again, for not doing that. I suspect when these numbers drop on Thursday, that will be the break. That will be the moment where people go, actually, no more with this. Do you think we might be about to see the rather large straw that's going to break the camel's back?
Well, possibly, but probably not, because for the past 20, 25, 30 years, people have been saying this, and the democracy is just completely ignored. The will of the people is completely ignored time and time again. So I don't think the government's going to turn around and suddenly decide to start listening to people. They'll just keep doing what they've been doing for years, which is just to ignore us. And as Bertolt Brecht said, if we don't like what the electorate want, we'll elect a new electorate. And I do think there is an aspect of that. You're bringing a lot of people over a long period of time, and we all know that, generally speaking, they don't vote for, reduced immigration. If you are bringing a lot of people in every year, they think, well, in the long term, we'll water down that opinion anyway. So I do think there's a bit of anti or extra democratic movement here. They just don't care what the people think.
It would appear so. Benjamin, thank you very much. Benjamin Loughnane there is a research fellow at the Bow Group. Just in light of the Tory MP's comments today, the chair of the all-party group on migration, saying that we really need more immigration, and those figures set to drop on Thursday, which all the noises suggest are going to be pretty catastrophic in terms of the numbers. We're going to go big on it here. We've got an immigration special. I'll tell you a bit more about that later on in the show. Are we too reliant on mass immigration? But still loads to come between now and 4 o'clock. Rishi Sunak will be speaking in the Commons any minute after returning from the G7 summit. I imagine he'll have a few more questions to answer. And crucially, on the 6th anniversary of the Manchester Arena bombing, I will ask just how great is the risk of another terror attack from Islamist extremists? It's also the anniversary, of course, of the murder of Fusilier Lee Rigby. We'll be remembering both of those. But first, it's your headlines with Tamsin.
Patrick, thanks very much. Here are the headlines at 3:33. Police investigating the disappearance of Madeleine McCann are reportedly set to launch a major search in Portugal. Local media saying a remote reservoir on the Algarve, which the main suspect in the case used to visit, has become a key focus of their inquiries. The area is about 30 miles from the resort in Praia de Luz, where she went missing 16 years ago. The Home Secretary says she's confident there was nothing untoward in the way she handled a speeding offence. Suella Braverman is under pressure over a possible breach of the ministerial code, following claims she asked for help in arranging a private speed awareness course. The Prime Minister has spoken to his ethics advisor about the matter, but it's understood no formal inquiry has yet been launched. Speaking for the first time about the row, the Home Secretary didn't deny asking civil servants for assistance.
Last summer, I was speeding. I regret that. I paid the fine and I took the points. But we're focused now on delivering for the British people and working for them.
Did you ask civil servants to put you on a one-on-one speeding course?
In relation to the process, I'm focused on delivering for the British people, do my job as Home Secretary. What I will say is that, in my view, I'm confident that nothing untoward has happened.
Labour has warned the NHS won't survive 5 more years of a Conservative government. Setting out his vision for the health service, Sir Keir Starmer promised to get the NHS back on its feet if his party wins the next election. He also said A&E wait times and ambulance response targets will be hit by 2030. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Well, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2427 and €1.1494 euros. The price of gold is £1,586.98 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,767 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Yeah, very quickly, I'm going to whiz you over live now to the House of Commons. Rishi Sunak is speaking about the G7 summit.
As I report to the House on the G7 summit, I want to address head-on a mistaken view that is heard too often. The idea that Britain is somehow in retreat on the world stage or that our influence is in decline. I reject that utterly. Yeah. What we've seen in recent months is this Conservative government delivering the priorities of the British people and bringing our global influence to bear on some of the world's biggest challenges. Nowhere is that clearer than Ukraine. It was a pleasure and privilege to welcome my friend President Zelensky back to the UK last week. His attendance at the G7 summit was a historic moment. When Putin launched his war, he gambled that our resolve would falter. But he was wrong then, and he is wrong now. Russia's military is failing on the battlefield. Their economy is failing at home as we tighten the stranglehold of sanctions. And the image of the G7 leaders standing shoulder to shoulder with President Zelensky in Hiroshima sent a powerful message to the world: we will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. Yeah. Of course, we've seen a huge collective effort across our allies, not least the United States. But I'm incredibly proud of our role at the forefront of international support for Ukraine. The first country in the world to train Ukrainian troops. First in Europe to provide lethal weapons. First to commit tanks. And just this month, first to provide long-range weapons. And we've now at the forefront... OK,
so that is Rishi Sunak talking in the House of Commons there about the G7 summit. If you want to get more information on that, then you can go to the GB News website, .com. But I'm going to talk about something else now, because today is a momentous day, sadly momentous day, for two terror attacks that took place. There's the Manchester Arena bomb, and there's also, of course, the murder of Lee Rigby. And I think it's important that we don't forget either of those two things. I'm going to be talking about these rather a lot throughout the course of the show, both, of course, committed by radical Islamists, and asking how much further along the line have we come? What lessons have been learned? What can be done to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again? Are we repeating the same mistakes? But there's been a 2-minute silence in Manchester to mark the 6th anniversary of the suicide bombing in which 22 people were killed. The attack happened at the end of an Ariana Grande concert, and among the victims were 6 children. A new report says many of those at the arena have not had sufficient psychological support to help deal with the trauma of it. We're going to go now to GB News' North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper.
Well, today marks 6 years since the death of 22 people after an Ariana Grande concert here at Manchester Arena, after terrorist Salman Abedi detonated an explosive device. Now, today at midday, we heard a minute's silence at Manchester Victoria Station outside the permanent memorial to those victims. Around 100 people stood in silence remembering those victims. We then heard a chaplain speak about the community coming together in order to remember those 22 people who lost their lives. People brought flowers and balloons. This is always a highly, highly emotional day in Manchester. People really feel the loss. Those survivors, of course, of the attack as well, also feeling it today. Earlier on, I got the opportunity to speak to Ken and June Tron, family members of Philip Tron, who's one of those 22 victims who lost their lives 6 years ago today. Here's what they told me about how they remember Philip.
Cheeky, funny, would do anything for anybody, but me. I'll come the last of the list. Just an all-rounder. Everybody loved him. Someone had said when he passed away, he was the little guy with a big heart, and I love to use that because it just puts it right. That's where he was, a little guy with a big heart. Loved family, loved socialising. You know, he's
big circle of friends. He got on with everybody.
Yeah.
You know,
all ages.
all liked him. You know,
all ages.
Working in a pub, they all went in, and no matter how many, if you'd only been in once, the next time you went in, you'd remember what your drink was.
Mm-hmm.
It was, you know, and just a cheery welcome for everybody.
Well, that's what today is all about, of course. We heard June and Ken there remembering Philip and remembering the positive things, the happy memories that they have of Philip, who, of course, was one of those 22 people to sadly lose their lives 6 years ago today here at Manchester Arena. Now, over the years, I've spoken with lots of victims, family members, who tell me all the time that one of the most important things is not letting Salman Abedi win. It's remembering those 22 people who lost their lives here today, 6 years on from that most horrendous of terrorist attacks.
Yeah, absolutely shocking, that, and the catalogue of errors that led up to that attack being allowed to take place, and then also when it comes to the response to it afterwards as well, really makes my blood boil. But today is also the 10th anniversary of another terror attack that caused utter revulsion. Soldier Lee Rigby was murdered by 2 Islamist extremists just on the streets of London on the 22nd of May 2013 in the most barbaric and sickening fashion. I am asking today, just how great is the risk of another attack from Islamist terrorists? The terror threat level at the moment is substantial, which means an attack is likely. I'm joined now by the counter-terrorism expert, Wagner, who joins me now, I believe. There he is. Wagner, thank you very much. Look, I was doing a bit of research before I came on, and, you know, we've got a Prevent counter-terror programme that has been accused of giving money to groups which appear to show support for the Taliban. A cursory Google just shows the amount of terrorists that we release from prison on a near weekly basis, sometimes early. Prisons themselves appear to be a hotbed, a hot spot for learning how to be a jihadi. And that's before we've got onto the open border we've got in the Channel. I mean, have we learned any lessons, do you think, from the likes of Lee Rigby and the Manchester Arena bomb?
Well, I think we have learned some lessons, and I think we're going to learn more lessons as a result of us getting more cognizant as the threat evolves. What we need to do is we need to stay ahead of the threat as it evolves, because these terrorists are looking to destabilize the West, and we need to be doing everything that we can. Now, obviously, we are aware that, for example, the prison is a hotbed now for terrorists or potential terrorists to be recruited and to actually carry out terrorist attacks. Now that we know that that's taking place, we need to be able to put measures in place to prevent that from happening. Of course, we can't prevent everything from happening, but when we do know a risk is posed, then we need to be taking those measures to be able to deal with it.
Are we too soft on terrorists? I mean, I only have to think back to the Fishmonger Hall terrorist, Usman Khan, who managed to convince people that he'd been rehabilitated and then went on to stab to death 2 people who'd been helping him get rehabilitated, if you will. Are we too soft on convicted terrorists, people on watch lists as well?
Well, I do. In some senses, we could be seen to be soft, but we have to be proportionate in our response to terrorists, because one of the modus operandi of terrorists is for us to go beyond the threshold of our own laws and our own policies when it comes to dealing with them, because that's one of the ways that they end up recruiting more people to their cause, and then they actually put that messaging out that actually Western governments are what we claim them to be, because this is how they're treating us when they're meant to be, above board in how they deal with us. So in some senses, it does appear to be the case that we are soft on them, but no, we need to stick to the letter of the law when it comes to dealing with these.
How much of a threat do you think what's going on in the Channel poses, just as a basic potential security breach, really? I'm getting a lot of emails in about this right now, which is it would appear to be an obvious possible threat that we maybe could be doing more to stop.
Well, yes, of course, we don't know who is coming in, and we don't know what threat they pose or what threat they're likely to pose later on. As you rightly pointed out in the case of Usman Khan and the Fishmongers Hall, he managed to use disguised compliance. He basically pulled the wool over everyone's eyes, showed that he was rehabilitated, and ended up killing the very people who were tasked with actually stopping him from continuing to be a terrorist. And so when we've got people coming in illegally from across the pond, we don't know who they are, we don't know what threat they're going to pose in the future, and we need to really seriously deal with them in a proportionate way, in a legal way, so that we can certainly deal with any potential threat that they do end up posing.
Where do you think, in your view, most of the radicalisation takes place? I'm just going to preempt what a few people might say to this as well, by the way, which is that, the largest growing threat, apparently, the fastest growing threat is the far-right threat, and I do understand that, but by far the largest actual existing threat is the Islamist threat. So, and that's given the nature of the 2 terror attacks we're talking about here, Wazika. I'm just going to focus on that, if that's all right. Where do you think there the majority of the radicalisation takes place? I ask because I would be concerned that maybe we are a little bit too shy about going into mosques, for example, and really getting to grips with some of the literature that's on display there, or some of the preachers that they may have.
Well, I think people can get radicalised in a number of ways and from different streams and from different people. And I think what we need to do is we need to be at least intelligent-led when it comes to finding those streams of radicalisation or those radicalisers and target them. So it could be certainly in the case of ISIS, they were using the internet and radicalising our own Brits and then convincing them to make the hijra, which is basically the journey across to Syria and Iraq to join the Islamic State. That was happening. But remember, before ISIS, we also had terrorist attacks taking place here. So people were being radicalized here. So we did have some mosques who had questionable literature, certainly extreme. And there was a sense, certainly, of fear of tackling that due to Islamophobia or being accused of racism.
Wazit, look, thank you, always a pleasure. Wazit there, who is the counter-terrorism expert. As we just look back on those two devastating terror attacks, but crucially as well, and I will be doing this throughout the show, looking forward, really. What lessons have been learned? How safe are we now? But different story entirely now, because 16 years since Madeleine McCann went missing, Portuguese police are going to carry out new searches in the Algarve. This story just dropped about half an hour or so ago. I'll be giving you the very latest on this when I come back. Patrick Christys on GB News. We are Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the...
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, there's been a major development in the Madeleine McCann case. Portuguese police are going to carry out new searches in the Algarve, near where the little girl went missing 16 years ago. Local media reports that the reservoir near Silves, about 50 kilometres from Praia de Luz, was visited by the main suspect in the disappearance, a man who's been named as Christian B. The convicted child abuser and drug dealer has not been charged, and of course he does deny any involvement in the case. I'm joined now by Jim Gamble, who led the initial British investigation into Madeleine McCann's disappearance. Jim, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. How important a development is this, and have you guys already searched this particular reservoir?
Well, my initial involvement was through CEOP sending out behavioural psychologists to support, and then I later carried out a review for the Home Secretary Alan Johnson, looking what had and what had not been done, and what indeed should be done again. And I have to say that this site, the reservoir, which is about 40 minutes from the scene where Madeleine went missing, was searched in February and March of 2008. Now, that was funded by a local lawyer and it was not the police teams that you would expect that carry that out. I think what's particularly interesting is that the German police have been absolutely 100% focused on this investigation. They believe that he is the right person, that they're suspect, that they have in custody for another crime. And they haven't wavered from that. And given what I know about the German police and having worked with them in the past, they're generally quite conservative and quite cautious. So there's a high level of confidence with them that they are on the right track. So what will be interesting to see over the next few days is what they do that's different. I'm sure it'll be a much more, because it's the German police who are leading this, facilitated by the Portuguese, and that's important. And I think they'll do a much more rigorous search, and I'm hoping that it's based on some information they have, which they haven't as yet shared with the wider public, so that it's more targeted, and of course they will have the full range of technical resources available to them to make a search more effective.
We are now, unfortunately, so many years on from the initial disappearance of Madeleine McCann. This reservoir is pretty vast, isn't it? How hopeful are you of finally finding Maddie here?
Well, the truth is I wouldn't pin my hopes on this. I think it's another line of inquiry. I think because it's coming from the German police investigation, that makes it extremely interesting. But we're going to have to wait and see. If they're just searching the entire area, then I think I'm not hopeful. If they're searching specific areas with a specific intent and a deliberate focus, then that means they're operating on the back of new information or new intelligence. And I think the key issue for me, and that people should be aware of, is this. He is, a prime suspect. He absolutely fits the profile of the type of criminal that would commit this crime. And we know that opportunity was there through significant circumstantial evidence that the German police have to hand. And some of that evidence we already had. But the key is this. I've also seen investigations where we've become so focused on one offender and spend so much time and so many years and resources chasing down that lead that we miss, another potential suspect. So I think this is a situation where we need to wait and see what comes out of it. And we need to remind people watching your programme, if you were in Praia da Luz, if you did visit the reservoir area in the day or days immediately after this, did you see anything? Because it's never too late to reflect on something you saw and report it into Operation Grange, who will share it with the Portuguese and German police.
Absolutely. It's important as well to know, apparently, just off reports, they're searching some of the woodland around this reservoir as well, so it doesn't seem like it's just going to be a kind of water-based search, as it were. Jim, I've got to ask you, what chance is there, in your view, that Maddie is still alive?
Well, whenever we produced the original CEOP Minute for Madeleine McCann video several years after she'd gone missing, we did some research because we were trying to prompt the conscience of someone who knew what had happened, or indeed the person that was involved. And in that research, we found 11 cases where children who'd been abducted had, returned, had been refound many years later. I mean, so it does happen. The Beast of Belgium cases in the United States. But of course, as time goes on, we become, more desperate. But we should never lose hope. And I think that is the key. I, for one, am never going to accept that Madeleine McCann is dead up to and until I see evidence of it. My primary goal is that we find out exactly what has happened to this little girl, and that's the key. German police are very good. They are very focused, and they really do have the bit between their teeth.
Jim, thank you very much, and hope to talk to you again soon. Jim Gamble there, who led the initial British investigation into Maddie's disappearance. Right, I've got loads more coming your way in the next hour. I've got a big debate, OK, on Suella Braverman, whether or not people think she should stay or go. I'm going to talk to someone who says that she should lose her job. I'm firmly in the camp that if civil servants are leaking this out there, it should be them who go. But I've got all that coming your way and much, much more. And a veteran as well, who is going to be talking to me about what lessons have been learned following the anniversary of Lee Rigby's murder on the streets of Britain. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former Government Minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon, everybody. It's just gone 4 p.m. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Here's what I've got this hour. And we start, don't take your eyes and ears off this, ladies and gentlemen, because it's developing every few minutes or so. Suella Braverman calls for her to go. Look, is she being stitched up by the civil service? And frankly, is Sunak absolutely toast if he gets rid of Suella Braverman over this, well, quite spurious driving allegation? In other news, I'm also going to be talking about this as well. It's 10 years since the terrorist murder of Lee Rigby on the streets of Britain. We're remembering Lee Rigby. I'm going to be talking to a veteran as well to see what lessons have been learnt, if any, to stop something like this happening again. And get a load of this. This makes my blood boil, OK? Sickening online pranks are taking place with increased regularity. But I'm asking, where are the parents in all of this? We've got a little clip here of a chap who's going up and it would appear to be, stealing a lady's dog, for example, and doing it for the likes. There's been people who've been just letting themselves into people's homes, people going into libraries and ripping pages out of it. What on earth is going on with all of these feral kids? And finally, as well, I'm going to be talking a little bit about this. Racial segregation in Britain. Yeah, you thought it might have been something that could never happen? Well, it looks as though it is. White people are essentially being discouraged to not go to theatres. Find out more very, very shortly. Patrick Christys on GB News. Right, we have a new email address, and it is working. There's lots of people emailing in to say it's not working. Well, I'm getting the email, so it is working. It's gbviews@gbnews.com. OK? I want you to get in touch about Suella Braverman. Do you think she's being stitched up a little bit here? Can Rishi Sunak actually afford to let her go? I'm also, of course, going to be talking about that terror threat as we remember two devastating terror attacks, both anniversaries of those, the Manchester Arena bombing and the murder of Lee Rigby. GBviews at gbnews.com. Now, here's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon to you. And our top story today, as you've been hearing, police investigating the disappearance of Madeleine McCann are reportedly set to launch a major search in Portugal. A remote reservoir on the Algarve will be their main focus. That's about 30 miles from the resort in Praia da Luz, where she first went missing in 2007. The main suspect in the case, Christian B, used to visit the area. He's currently in jail in Germany for 5 sexual offences committed in Portugal in 2017. The search, due to start tomorrow, is expected to last 2 days. Now, here at home, the Home Secretary says she is confident there was nothing untoward in the way she handled a speeding offence. Suella Braverman is accused of asking for a private speed awareness course to be arranged after she was caught speeding last year. If it's true, it could be a possible breach of the ministerial code. The Prime Minister has spoken to his ethics advisor, but it's understood that no formal inquiry has been launched. Well, earlier, the Home Secretary didn't deny asking civil servants for assistance.
I was speeding, I regret that. I paid the fine and I took the points. But we're focused now on delivering for the British people and working for them.
Did you ask civil servants to put you on a one-on-one speeding course?
In relation to the process, I'm focused on delivering for the British people, do my job as Home Secretary. What I will say is that, in my view, I'm confident that nothing untoward has happened.
Well, the shadow Public Health Minister Andrew Gwynn says Suella Braverman needs to resign.
Look, I've got real frustration here about this because at a time of a cost of living crisis that people want real answers to, at the time that our NHS is on its knees and needs fixing, we're here yet again talking about another Tory minister who has sought to bend the rules, play the system for their own advantage. Of course, she needs to face an ethics advisor. I would go further. I think Rishi Sunak needs to show some leadership and show her the door.
Now, Labour says it warns the NHS won't survive 5 more years of a Conservative government. Setting out his vision for the health service, Sir Keir Starmer promised to get the NHS back on its feet if his party won the next election. He pledged to reduce NHS waiting lists. He committed to hit the 4-hour A&E target and improve ambulance response times by 2030.
At the next election, the NHS is on the line. The Conservative Party that's brought it to its knees will put it in the ground. But mark my words, if all we do in the Labour Party is to place the NHS on a pedestal and leave it there, that's not good enough either. We've got to fix the fundamentals, renew its purpose, make it fit for the future.
Sir Keir Starmer. Now, nearly a third of young survivors of the Manchester Arena bombing received no professional support, with a report finding their experiences weren't validated by adults in positions of care. 22 people were killed when a suicide bomber detonated his device at the Ariana Grande concert 6 years ago. The Be the Difference report showed 3/4 of children at the event were mentally affected by the attack, but professional support just wasn't offered to 4 in 10 of them. International news, and Russia's Wagner group of mercenaries has announced plans to leave Ukraine's eastern city of Bakhmut. The group's founder says forces will retreat from the 25th of May until the 1st of June. And that comes after Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky dismissed claims by the paramilitary organisation that it had successfully taken the city. Here at home, there's a warning over a number of new sophisticated scams going around. The consumer group Which says at least 4 are doing the rounds. They include fake PayPal and missing person appeals and fraudulent app alerts. The government plans to work with Ofcom to use new technology to reduce the number of scams. A bus driver from Devon has cashed in a £1 million prize from a lottery scratch card. Steve Goodwin picked up the winning Bank the Cash ticket from a co-op in South Devon whilst waiting for a kebab. The lucky winner says he'll use the money to buy a house and have a few holidays, but he plans to keep driving buses. Good for him. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
OK, so I'm going to be talking a lot very, very shortly about the politics of the day and the Madeleine McCann investigation, etc. But I just wanted, right at the top of this hour, to drill down into something that certainly means a lot to me, and I dare say means a lot to everybody watching and listening this as well. Today marks two terrible anniversaries, the Manchester Arena bombing and the slaughter of Fusilier Lee Rigby. Both were atrocities committed by radical Islamists who slipped through the net. I would have thought that a man on MI5's radar detonating a suitcase full of explosives in an arena full of children, and someone who claims to have been radicalised by Anjem Choudhury hacking a soldier to pieces on the street would have been enough of a wake-up call for us to try to prevent this from happening again. Well, talking of prevent, actually, a report found that the counter-extremism programme may well have been giving money to a group that appeared to support the Taliban, so that didn't go particularly well, did it? The Manchester Arena bomber's brother, Ismail, was allowed to flee the country before being brought to justice, and Anjem Choudhury is notoriously out and about walking the streets. We know that jihadi radicalisation is rife in prisons. There is every chance that prison creates more jihadis than it rehabilitates. We've got people like Fishmongers Hall terrorist Usman Khan gaming the system, convincing people that he's no longer a threat, being sent out into the wild and stabbing two young people to death. A cursory Google this morning of UK terrorists released from prison immediately brings up loads of examples. Like Karam Iqbal, who reportedly was initially denied parole. He's been released from prison just 2 months later at the end of his sentence. Now, Iqbal, who referred to himself, apparently, as the father of terrorism, was rejected for release by the parole board in October 2022, but was allowed to leave prison in December of the same year. Here's one from March earlier this year. A terror gang linchpin inspired by Al-Qaeda to hatch a plot to blow up the London Stock Exchange has been cleared for release. This is all according to reports, of course. Mohammed Choudhury, 33, has been freed and recalled to prison in the past. Examples like this are absolutely everywhere. You can just go and Google it yourself right now, and you will find 20 or 30 of these within minutes. Now, I want to make this very clear, I absolutely would never want to speak for the families of the victims of the Manchester Arena bombing or Lee Rigby's family or anything like that, and that's not what I'm doing here. It's just my personal view that the best way to honour their memories would be to make sure that the same type of terror attacks don't happen again. And I can't help but feel like we're still too soft on terror. And we're not helping ourselves with what might as well be an open-door policy in the Channel, for example. Now, we always hear this immortal phrase, lessons have been learned. Have we really learnt lessons here, given everything I've just rattled off? Are we really doing all we can to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself? Yeah, so that's what I think. I want to hear from you. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. Remember, it's .com, not .co.uk. I've been getting a lot of emails in, and just specifically as well, someone called Sue, who is adamant that the emails aren't getting through. They are, Sue, so make sure that you keep them coming, all right? I'll have a little more on that later this hour. But now to our top story of the day, and that is Suella Braverman is under mounting pressure over her handling of a speeding offence. Now, it's been reported that the Home Secretary asked officials to try to arrange a private speed awareness course for her rather than take penalty points on her driving licence. Suella Braverman says that she's confident that nothing untoward happened.
Well, first and foremost, I'm focused on the priorities for the British people as Home Secretary. That's cutting serious crime with more police officers, that's standing up for victims of child sexual abuse. It's about stopping the boats, and I'm not going to take a backward step from working on those issues. In relation to your question, last summer I was speeding. I regret that. I paid the fine and I took the points. But we're focused now on delivering for the British people and working for them.
Did you ask civil servants to put you on a one-on-one speeding calls?
In relation to the process, I'm focused on delivering for the British people, do my job as Home Secretary. What I will say is that, in my view, I'm confident that nothing untoward has happened.
Would you welcome an investigation into this? Have you spoken to the Prime Minister? Would you welcome one?
As I said, I'm focused on working as Home Secretary. That's why I'm here. I've met with victims today. I'm making a big announcement today. I'd appreciate the focus on an announcement which is standing up for victims and survivors. In relation to the speeding ticket and my fine and points, I'm very confident.
Very finally on this, Prime Minister, but this is really important because you've broken rules before. You've had to resign for breaking the ministerial code. You've admitted now to breaking or having a speeding fine. You've accused of breaking the code for a second time. How good a look is it for a senior politician, one of the most senior politicians of the country, to be viewed as a constant rule breaker?
I got a speeding ticket. I paid the fine. I took the points. In my view, nothing untoward has happened. Thank you.
OK, well, look, you've got to have a look at Dominic Raab, who fell victim to, in fact, at times, completely false leaks that were published out. So he was kind of had a trial by media before he was moved aside, despite having never actually shouted or swore at anyone, and had to work with a man who supposedly nearly gave Gibraltar back to the Spanish. But he was, of course, deemed to be out of order for tub-thumping a little bit. We all know the Boris Johnson case as well, although, to be fair, at times, of course, he didn't cover himself in glory, did he? But does this not have the whiff of another civil service leak, really? And it's all very well and good talking about the ministerial code and people maybe breaking the ministerial code, but it just seemed to be happening that there's a pattern emerging of right-wing, pro-Brexit, anti-mass migration politicians in high office falling foul of leaks. Does it not? But you can understand maybe why such a high-profile figure like Suella Braverman would want to have a one-to-one session on a matter like this. And for those people who are saying that, oh, well, it would all be anonymous and all of this stuff, just check out what comedian and writer David Baddiel has had to say. I don't think he's particularly known for his massive support of the Tory party. Talking about the speed awareness he attended, Baddiel tweeted, I went on the usual one. It's meant to be anonymous, or at least nothing about the course is meant to be revealed beyond itself. And at the end of it, the host said, are there any questions? And the first one was, can I tell my mates I was on a speeding course with David Baddiel? So, yeah, it's not exactly anonymous, really, is it? Well, with Suella Braverman once again under fire from critics and opposition parties as questions loom about whether she's broken this ministerial code, does she have to go? I've got political commentators Matthew Stadlin and Russell Quirk who are going to duke it out right now. Russell, I'll start with you. Should Suella Braverman go?
Absolutely not. And I think we need to be very, very careful that, not only do we let minor indiscretions that befall all of us as human beings, that we don't let those things get in the way of progressing politics. Look, this is, as you've alluded to, Patrick, it's no coincidence, is it, that this incident, this fine, this speeding incident, was 12 months ago. Someone, somewhere, in the civil service or elsewhere, has had this particular revelation, big inverted commas, in their pocket, waiting for the right time to explode this little bomb for Suella Braverman. It is no coincidence that this comes just a few days after her speech, which was all about actually not just the perils of illegal immigration, but also having a little sly dig at her boss, Rishi Sunak. It's no coincidence that this bomb had dropped just a few days after she made that speech. The reality is she got caught for speeding. She was offered the choice of either a speed awareness course or points. She asked about the course in terms of, let's be honest, she's a high-profile person, was then, is even more so now. She simply requested that for all sorts of very obvious reasons, as anyone that's high-profile is entitled to do, according to lawyers like Nick Freeman, she simply asked that she take that course as a private thing rather than the distraction for the other people on that course of having the then Attorney General on the Zoom call. What on earth is wrong with that? And I really understand, Patrick, why the left are making a meal of this, but it is a storm in a teacup.
Matthew, I'll bring you in now. I mean, there should be more focus, I think, on where a lot of these leaks are coming from, and less so about the straightforward nature of the situation as we understand it, which is that a Home Secretary gets the speeding ticket, Attorney General she was at the time, gets a speeding ticket, says is offered the same course as everybody else, asks whether or not she could do it privately. They said no, and then she took the ticket and the fine. I mean, what's the problem, Matthew?
So, good to see you, Patrick. To me, it's quite straightforward. Either the Home Secretary broke the ministerial code or she didn't. And I think everyone party to this conversation, and most of the viewers this afternoon know that government ministers are not supposed to ask civil servants to help them out on personal issues. She sped, she accepted that she sped, she ended up taking the points, but what she should have done is gone, like the rest of us, to the course director and applied to have it done privately if she didn't want to be exposed publicly. If instead of that, she has actually got civil servants involved, that may mean that it's a breach of the ministerial code. It will be her second breach of the ministerial code. And of course, she should go. The big problem for Rishi Sunak here is he was so weak. Don't forget, he got thrashed by Liz Truss amongst Tory members when he tried to become leader the first time. That was a catastrophic premiership. I think most of us would agree. He was so weak that he felt he had to appoint Suella Braverman to Home Secretary under a week after she resigned the first time. Just let that sink in for a moment. A Home Secretary resigns for breaching the ministerial code, and then 6 days later, she's reappointed to the same post. Rishi Sunak has only got himself to blame.
Look, I can, Russell, understand that with hindsight, Suella Braverman possibly should not have spoken to a civil servant about this. I can also understand, however, as we await for more specific details on this, that it might have just been some kind of passing comment. She may well have been on business. She may well have been doing it because she wanted to try to do it at her own time so she didn't get in the way of her job. To me, there is quite a clear grey area there. But, Russell, it just appears to me like our civil service, when you add it all up, we've had Boris Johnson, we've had Dominic Raab and now Suella. I mean, this notion that they've potentially got some kind of vendetta against right-wing, pro-Brexit, anti-mass migration politicians is starting to stack up, isn't it?
Well, Patrick, is well documented, isn't it? We know also, they had a little pop at Steve Barclay, didn't they, 2 or 3 weeks ago, trying to get rid of him. They did the same against Priti Patel. And whether it's obstruction in terms of not carrying out government policy that enacted by way of an elected mandate, or whether it's this kind of briefing and this troublemaking, I mean, it all amounts to the same thing, really, is that we've got an unelected, unaccountable civil service trying to muddy the waters of those elected politicians. And as I say, the timing of this, of course, is no coincidence. Why didn't this come out 12 months ago? Why is it waited till now? And I think, look, we're on a very slippery slope, honestly, if we really think that the so-called blob, as I think the media call it, if they, as an unaccountable entity, really should have the power that clearly they seem to have, supported by some on the left of the media, the likes of The Independent and the FT and others, and The Guardian, of course. We should be very, very careful that we don't end up in a situation where we are indeed run by unelected bureaucrats. Let's be honest, that's why we got out of the EU.
Look, it's a good point. And Matthew, I'll put that to you. We've got a democratically elected Home Secretary here whose primary focus is to get net migration down somewhere in an ideal world below the 700,000 mark and also to stop the boats, OK? Do you not think the public care more about her doing those things than they do about whether or not she tried to do a private speed awareness course and in the end she took her points on her licence and paid a flipping fine anyway?
So first of all, it doesn't look like she's doing a particularly good job in driving those figures down. If you want migration to come down, wait till the news comes out on Thursday, when it's rumoured anyway that Suella Braverman will resign because net migration figures are through the roof. So that answers the first question. Second question is, I think viewers can make their own minds up pending an inquiry. And what a waste of money an inquiry would be. Can't Rishi Sunak have a man-to-woman, as it were, conversation with his Home Secretary and said, look, did you ask civil servants to do this or not? If you did, you've got to go. She refused to ask the question. You played that clip at length. She said her focus was on driving down crime and immigration, got that bit in, but she also refused very specifically to answer the question, very straightforward question, did you ask civil servants to intervene on your behalf to set up a one-to-one course? She didn't answer it.
I get that, but Matthew, sorry, just very finally to you, mate, if that's all right. Isn't there a fine line here? If it's not the civil servant's job to get involved in personal business, if I was a government minister and I looked over at a civil servant and went, oh, sorry, Tracy, would you mind getting me a coffee, please? All of a sudden, have I got them involved in my personal business? And that's what it takes for them to try to bring me down. And they said I was using them as some kind of lackey. I mean, is this where we're at, Matthew, really?
That depends on, if there is an inquiry, what the inquiry finds. But listen, the best way to behave in public honesty is to do so properly, to behave with integrity, and then you don't lose your job. She's already shown that she didn't behave with integrity because she resigned under the Liz Truss administration, as I said, so she's got record on this. The crazy thing is that Sunak, because he was so desperate to become Prime Minister and because he was in such a weak position having been thrashed by Truss, he felt he had to appoint someone who'd been basically fired the week before or had to resign the week before.
All right, very quickly, Russell, because I'm pressed for time. Do you think Sunak can afford to get rid of Braverman? Because, yes, whilst, let's be honest, the figures are pretty shocking, she at least talks a good game on immigration.
No, look, we really shouldn't, because otherwise we might as well democratically just all give up and go home. Seriously.
OK, that was very quick, and it's exactly what I needed. Thank you. Both of you, great stuff. Matthew Stadler there and Russell Quirk, two esteemed political commentators waxing lyrical on this. It's a big debate, ladies and gents. We will continue to have it. Suella Braverman, should she stay, should she go? It's pretty clear, I think, where I stand on all of this. But you can get lots more of that story on our website. Simply head to gbnews.com and you will find the very best analysis, opinion, and all that breaking news. And there we go. So, a teenager... get a load of this, is terrorising members of the public by stealing dogs, breaking into people's homes, asking women if they want to die, and he's doing it to get attention on social media, on this thing, to get attention on TikTok. What on earth is going on? And I'm asking, because he's not the only one, by the way, where the heck are the parents in all of this? Why have we got so many feral kids? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, there are more questions facing social media giants today. I actually think there are loads of questions facing the very fabric of society and what on earth parents are doing. But get a load of this. An 18-year-old TikTok user went viral for effectively breaking into someone's house. Bakari Agaro, who goes by the name of Mizzy, caused outrage this week after a video emerged of him entering the London home of a complete stranger without their consent. If you're listening on radio, I'll talk you through the clip. He sees that the front door is open a bit because someone's doing some cleaning on the patio outside. He walks in, an individual comes up the stairs and basically says, you know, what are you doing in my home? It's absolutely terrifying. You've got two lads there who appear to be wearing, you know, hoods, etc., clearly complete strangers. They then walk into their living room, they sit down on the sofa, and they think it's a great laugh, and they think everything's absolutely fine, you know, and then they get out. Apparently, there were kids in that property, so there's children there in the property, supposedly. Other videos, including grabbing someone's dog, OK, and trying to run away with it. He says he gave the dog back, but it's hardly the point. There's what appears to be quite an elderly individual on a bench in a park, and they've got a little, you know, Jack Russell-type dog with them, and he grabs it and runs off with the dog under his arm, like this. There's a lot more of these videos. Again, he appears to go into a library at one point and just start ripping pages out of library books. This teenager has deleted his account, and there are calls for the police to investigate. I'm not surprised. But also questions as to why TikTok didn't take these videos down themselves. But I don't just want to singularly highlight this particular chap, who, like I said, goes by the name Mizzy or whatever. This is happening all too often now. And if my parents had seen me release a video online like this, I dread to think what would have happened. And it poses some serious questions. I'm joined now by, I think, the right woman here to set this guy straight. It's GB News presenter Nana Aquia. Nana, thank you very, very much. I am potentially quite irrationally angry about this, but it winds me up. But what's going on here?
Well, do you know what? It winds me up immensely. And first of all, because it's dangerous. Because if somebody goes into my home and I've got children downstairs, I don't know what I would do, you know, to protect my kids. And the other part of it is it's dangerous for them as well, because they are putting themselves in harm's way of somebody thinking that they're protecting their property, and it's not fair on the person whose home that they've gone into, because then suddenly you'll find yourself embroiled in some sort of crime potentially just by trying to protect yourself. The other side of this, which really annoys me immensely, is that on this particular one, this gentleman is black. And the reason I'm annoyed by that is because we already know that, I've looked at some statistics, 61% of knife crime murderers are black. OK, and this is in London. And 53% of those who perpetuate knife crime are black as well. And this is in London. So can you imagine the fear on those whose house they enter, because they may feel that they might well be a victim of this, and it doesn't help the cause for black youths, who are, of which there are many very well-behaved black youths, doesn't help the cause for how they're perceived. So it makes me very angry, because there are plenty of very well-behaved young black men.
Well, absolutely. And there are some other videos as well which appear to show this guy running up to people on the street with a hood up, with a balaclava, with a couple of mates, saying, yo, do you want to die? Do you want to die? I mean, good grief. If someone's got a heart condition, or anyone really, but if someone's got a heart condition, or they've got a young child with them, or like you've rightly said as well, let's say he goes up to the wrong person. I mean, you know, we wouldn't want him walking up to someone who's maybe just got out of the SAS or something like that. Then he ends up with his neck broken on the streets of London. But I can't help but wonder, Nana, you know, I don't know this guy, I don't know his background or anything, but if my parents had seen me putting videos like that on the internet, to put it mildly, it would have stopped pretty flipping quickly. And it just makes me wonder what's going on at home, maybe.
Well, you know, where the hell are his parents? If that were my child, that wouldn't happen. I can tell you that now. But where are the parents? I don't know whether he's old enough to be paying for his own mobile phone bill, but who's paying for that? Because I'm wondering what on earth is going on. And whilst we're at it, he's posting his face on there, so people know who he is. Where are the police on this? The Metropolitan Police should be on this like a rash. And for some odd reason, he's still carrying on. So there'll be people around him who know him. There'll be teachers who are looking at that who know him. There'll be parents who know him. This just tells you how great our police force are in London, that right now he seems to be carrying on with this scot-free. And yes, he's not alone. There are others. And what about the internet service providers as well? What about TikTok? What are they doing about this? This is an assault, actually. So he's perpetrating a crime. And yet, for some reason or other, he's getting away with it. He seems to think it's a joke, but it's not a joke, because if it goes wrong, there are so many other aspects that it could affect. And somebody who's innocent like me, or somebody's house who he goes into, who then may, act in self-defense, thinking they're being attacked, might do something that they will later regret and have to live with that.
You make such a great point about the police on all of this, because, this would stop very quickly if the police came down in like a ton of bricks. And it does beg the question, in light of what people get done for sometimes, for relatively minor things or accidental things, right? And you've got someone who's literally videoing himself here. I've never particularly had the compulsion to want to just go and break into someone's house, but one of the things that might have stopped me subconsciously is the idea that if I video myself doing it, I probably would get caught by the police, and that clearly doesn't appear to have happened. But Nana, I just wanted to talk to you quickly about something else that I know you're very, very passionate about as well. I'm just going to read the headline to you here. There's this theatre show with, quotes, an all-black audience that aims to explore race-related issues. They want it to be free from the white gaze. It's the theatre at Royal Stratford East. Is hosting a blackout, apparently. I'll talk about this a bit later on. Is this almost like racial segregation in Britain? What's going on here?
Well, it's out-and-out racism, isn't it? And it's not acceptable. It made my blood boil for all the hard work that people like me and others do to improve race relations. And then some numpty goes, oh, well, I'm going to have one event where it's only black people to avoid the white gaze. I mean, how can you put that down on your website, in writing, and think that that's perfectly acceptable? It's not acceptable at any level. Racism can work in all directions, and this is racism out and out. And the worst bit is, I'm not hearing much from the established media talking about this. Where is the outrage? If that had been the other way around, can you imagine if that had been the other way around? Whoever set that up would be out of business. They'd have lost their job. Dr. Shola would be everywhere. She'd be on it. Where is the outrage? Where is the outrage? It's disgusting, and it's not acceptable. And I would like to see Suella Braverman getting onto this. I'd like to see the Mayor of London approaching these people and asking why that's acceptable, because the other way round, it would not be tolerated.
Nana, thank you very much, as ever. Nana Okoye there, GB News presenter and an absolute legend as well, it must be said. Right, we've got loads coming your way. Of course, I'm going to give you the latest on the Madeleine McCann situation. Apparently there's a search that's going to take place there. I'll bring you the latest on that. I am also going to be talking to a veteran about the anniversary of Lee Rigby's murder, terrorist murder on the streets of Britain. But right now, it's your headlines with Polly.
Straightening my microphone. The headlines this hour. Police investigating the disappearance of Madeleine McCann are reportedly set to launch a major search in Portugal. Local media is saying a remote reservoir on the Algarve, which the main suspect in the case used to visit, has become a key focus of their inquiry. The area is about 30 miles from the resort in Praia de Luz, where she first went missing 16 years ago. The Home Secretary says she's confident there was nothing untoward in the way she handled a speeding offence. Suella Braverman is under pressure over a possible breach of the ministerial code following claims she asked for help in arranging a private speed awareness course. The Prime Minister has spoken to his ethics advisor about the matter, but it's understood no formal inquiry has been launched. And speaking for the first time about the row, the Home Secretary didn't deny asking civil servants for assistance.
Last summer, I was speeding. I regret that. I paid the fine and I took the points. But we're focused now on delivering for the British people and working for them.
Did you ask civil servants to put you on a one-on-one speeding course?
In relation to the process, I'm focused on delivering for the British people, do my job as Home Secretary. What I will say is that, in my view, I'm confident that nothing untoward has happened.
Labour has warned the National Health Service won't survive 5 more years of a Conservative government. Setting out his vision for the health service, Sir Keir Starmer today promised to get the NHS back on its feet if his party won the next election. He also said A&E wait times and ambulance response targets will be hit if he's in government by 2030. You can get more on all these stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Quick snapshot of today's markets for you. The pound will buy you $1.2416 and 1.1500 euros. The price of gold is £1,588.40 an ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,771 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Yes, now this is a story, a couple of stories, really, that I know are very, very close to the hearts of most of our viewers and listeners. Today is the 6th anniversary of the suicide bombing in which 22 people were killed at the Manchester Arena. The attack happened at the end of an Ariana Grande concert, and among the victims were 6 children. A new report says that many of those people involved are yet to get proper psychological help. But today is also the 10th anniversary of another devastating attack that caused utter revulsion. Fusilier Lee Rigby was brutally murdered in broad daylight in Woolwich by 2 Islamist extremists. I'm asking what lessons have been learnt from the death of Lee Rigby. Joining me now is combat veteran Trevor Colt. And Trevor has experience of fighting jihadis on their home turf, as it were, abroad, Iraq, Afghanistan. And Trevor, I'm just keen to get your view on your initial feelings anyway, as we, of course, remember Lee Rigby today and the legacy of his death, and whether or not you feel enough has been done in the wake of that to clamp down on Islamist extremism.
First of all, Patrick, thank you for having me on. I appreciate coming on your show all the time. Well, today's a quite sad day in a way. Obviously, the 10th anniversary of the death, should I say the murder, not the death, the murder of Lee Rigby on the streets of London. And has there been improvements? I don't think there has been, Patrick. You know, at the end of the day, we have to look at what's been happening over the last 5 or 6 years. We, the UK, have taken in lots and lots of people coming from Islamic countries into our neighbourhoods. And you've got to remember that a lot of serving soldiers, once they leave, live in and around London. Has there been an increase in CCTV? There's certainly been an increase in mosques. There's certainly been an increase in Sharia law in and around London. And a lot of the police officers don't go into certain parts of London. So if anything, we are going backwards rather than forwards. Now, today might be the anniversary of the murder of Lee Rigby. But 35 years ago, there was also the same brutal murder of Corporal Derek Woods and David Howes in Belfast, where our own government watched that murder from a helicopter and filmed it. So if anything, we aren't moving forward. We're actually stuck in like a bit of a time warp. So it's not looking good for those that come back from combat theatres and suffer PTSD. But we have to look at PTSD. A lot of people in London suffered from all the different terror attacks coming back from theatre. But how are we meant to solve it in London when the London mayor himself suffers PTSD on behalf of everybody else's trauma?
OK, and Trevor, as well, when I just look at how shorter sentences we often give to Islamist terrorists and the fact that our prisons appear to be almost training grounds for jihadis these days, I think you've got more chance of becoming a jihadi in prison than you have of being rehabilitated. I look at it and I just can't help but wonder whether we're sitting on a little bit of a time bomb here.
Patrick, we certainly are. I grew up in an era where our parents used to tell us crime doesn't pay. But quite clearly in the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen that, for instance, the 2 evil people that murdered Lee Rigby received legal aid. Taxpayers helped them fight their case in court. Yet I see daily veterans that are wounded who can't get legal aid to prosecute our own Ministry of Defence. So crime certainly pays at the minute, Patrick.
Yeah, and just on that as well, you know, we have a huge amount of veterans in this country, and a lot of them fall on hard times for whatever reason, whether they're suffering from mental health issues, physical issues as a result of injuries as well, just life stuff as well, you know, ordinary people falling on hard times. And I just feel as though we don't do enough for them, Trevor. And look, I've spoken a lot about Islamist terrorism, of course, and I don't really want to, you know, turn Lee Rigby's memory or whatever singularly into, you know, something to try to shine a light on Islamist terrorism. It's hard not to. We could maybe flip it on its head a bit, Trevor, and talk about what more should be done for our veterans, really, and maybe that's a way of honouring him. As we look 10 years on from his murder there, can we do more, for example, to house homeless veterans, to get them mental health care? I mean, that surely should be something that everyone should be championing. That would be a way to mark this very tragic event, perhaps.
Patrick, first of all, that's a fantastic way to do it. I know, and I don't speak to him that often now, but I do watch the work that Johnny Mercer is doing, and his hands are still slightly tied, but he is doing his best. Now, if we want to mark the 10th anniversary of Lee Rigby's murder, then the best thing to do, and I will say this, his mother, Lynn, does tremendous work. I've spoken to her in the past, but Lee Rigby's son, Jack, at the minute, is trying to raise £1,000 for every year his father's been murdered, and so far, he's raised nearly £45,000. So it would be great if all your viewers were to get onto the Just Giving page of Jack Rigby and try and help him raise as much money for Scotty's Little Soldiers, which the money's going towards help bereaved families of soldiers. So that's a great way to mark his anniversary.
No, absolutely. Look, Trevor, thank you very, very much for coming on and talking about this and for sticking your head above the parapet on numerous different issues there. That's Trevor Colt, though, who's a combat veteran. Like I said, you know, he's seen active service in, like, jihadi heartlands, as it were. I remember at the time there being outrage, obviously, about the murder of Lee Rigby at the hand of those two vile jihadis, and it did seem to die down rather quickly, and I spoke at length at the top of this hour about whether or not we are doing enough to make sure that situations like this don't happen again. We look at the Manchester Arena bombing, for example. That chap, Salman Abedi, was on a terror watch list, was allowed to slip through the net. His brother fled the country. He could never face justice. There were warning signs there that were missed left, right and centre. You've then got the individual who carried out the attack against Lee Rigby, claims anyway, and however much you can believe this guy, you know, is anyone's guess, but claims that he was radicalised partly by Anjem Choudhury. Anjem Choudhury, of course, is back out and about again. We've got numerous terrorists who are back out and about on the street. We let in a very high proportion of returning ISIS jihadis, for example, people who went abroad to fight for ISIS and then come back into this country. We have a largely open border policy with anyone who crosses the channel, for goodness sake. And it does appear to me, anyway, that we are not maybe learning our lessons from the past. We've got two very obvious examples there of two atrocious, abominable terror attacks. And if someone detonating a bomb in an arena full of children or a soldier being hacked to pieces on the streets of London isn't enough for us to maybe sharpen up a bit, then I'm not sure what is. But get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. Just remember it's .com now, not .co.uk. We have updated our email address. I've got a lot coming your way. We're going to be giving you the very latest as the police, of course, launch another investigation and a search operation in the hunt for Madeleine McCann. That's going to be taking place in Portugal at a reservoir. I'll give you all the details on that as and when we get it. But closer to home, a theatre will stage a play next month, which is an exclusively black audience, apparently, because they want a safe, private space free from what they call the white gaze. Is that racism? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, a London theatre is facing a backlash after organising what they call a blackout event, where white people are urged not to attend. The theatre Royal Stratford East in East London aims to create a safe, private space to allow an all-black identifying audience to explore race relations free from the white gaze. Organisers of the play said white patrons should not go to the performance of Tambo and Bones on July the 5th. The quotes-unquote blackout event is one of a run of 29 performances. It's described as a distorted minstrel show meets hip-hop concert. Right. OK. Well, I'm joined now by a lecturer at Oriel College, Oxford, Dr Marie Kauthar-Dauda. Thank you very, very much for joining me. Is this racist? She's either frozen or sitting very still. I think she's frozen. Oh, well, there we go. Unfortunately, we won't be able to get the views of Marie Kauthar-Dauda. It's amazing that she was cleared to come on air, but hopefully we'll manage to get her back on in just a second. Look, I had no intention to go to this play, I must be honest with you, but it does seem a little bit surprising, doesn't it, that in this modern day and age at the moment in Britain that you could have something that is tantamount to racial segregation. The pushback against it, no doubt, will be that, you know, white people have a huge amount of privilege and that they have had things their own way for generations and generations, and that, therefore, you know, if we just have to suck this one up. But it is not... It's the principle of it, is it not? That surely you shouldn't be banning people based on the colour of their skin from going to see or do anything. I mean, that seems a little bit shocking as far as I can tell. Do you or do you not think that is racist? I'm just going to delve into the inbox now and see what you lovely people have been saying. GB Views at gbnews.com. Remember that it is indeed the new email address at the moment. Suella Braverman is a non-story, says Nikki. The media should move on and leave her in place, but they won't. I wonder if the civil service will be as vigilante if there leaks once Labour in power. And this is a big thing. Nikki, I can't help but wonder, when it comes to the Suella Braverman stuff, should the story not really be why on earth are our civil service consistently leaking? You look at this. Suella Braverman supposedly has said to a civil servant, oh, is there any chance that I might be able to... yeah, all right. Is there any chance that I might be able to just get off this thing and do a private one-to-one speeding situation? They've said no, and then she's paid the fine, and then she's done it. So there we go. As I am reliably now informed, I am joined by lecturer at Oriel College, Oxford, Dr Marie Kauthar-Dauda. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Was that racist, the theatre banning people from going if they're white, essentially?
Well, the
issue of asking people of a certain skin color not to show up on a certain day can be definitely seen as racism. The practice is based on Douglas Turner's Ward's play Day of
Absolutely ridiculous that this lady, unfortunately, has been cleared twice now on this show. But there we go. Marie Corthododa. Unfortunately, we cannot get through to her, but there we go. Look, I've got a lot more coming your way, and I was delving into the inbox there. I will continue to do it. gbviews@gbnews.com. It's well known that racism is considered to only be committed by white people, says Linda. If white people have suggested that a theatre for them only, then that would be outrageous. And he's absolutely right. So, look, there we go. Let's go now, shall we, to the latest on Philip Schofield, who faces an uncertain future after he left this morning. Schofield claims that it was his decision to leave the show after more than 20 years. But his former colleague and GB News presenter Eamon Holmes is having absolutely none of it. Here's what he had to say earlier on.
Follows the big announcement on Saturday from Philip Schofield that he was stepping down.
Oh, stop, please, let's just stop this. He was sacked. Right, all this nonsense about giving him credit. I've decided to step down. I'm sure you did. Sure you did. Here's your P45. Now step down. You know, why do we propagate this language? I've decided to step down, and she says, "Oh, the couch will not feel the same without him being there." Well, she wanted him not there, so what's she moaning about the couch not feeling the same for? I mean, they deserve each other, I suppose.
Yeah, lots of questions about what next for Holly and Phil, aren't there, really? And supposedly he's been offered some kind of prime time slot. All right, I think he might be due to present something like the Soap Awards in the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure he'll be doing that. What does it mean for Dancing on Ice? I mean, will Holly and Phil be reuniting for all of that? It does appear to expose a lot of the complete and utter fakery. Everyone knows that there's a lot of fakery in television, don't they? But I think when you just see a clear, obvious example of that, like what's been going on behind the scenes at this morning, and then no doubt what's going to come out of it. Oh, this couch feels so empty without Phil. Well, as Eamon was saying there, you were desperately trying to get rid of him by the looks of things, and then Phil doesn't mention Holly in the film. It does seem a little bit sickening, doesn't it? But as Eamon said there, maybe they deserve each other. But look, it's time now for Patrick's Pick of the Day, where I focus on a story that you won't want to see or haven't seen on the front of any national newspapers, but it certainly caught my eye, and today is a tale from the BBC website. So get a load of this, all right? A school bus got stuck under a bridge for the second time in a year. Fortunately, it seems that no one was injured, OK? But what made this story stand out for me is the name of the reporter. So if you're writing the headline, "School bus gets stuck under low bridge again," who else to cover the story but a lady called Caroline Lowbridge? That's right, there you go. So I just thought I'd bring that to your attention. Fantastic. Surely that had to be an in-joke. Also, second time in a year. Anyway, as many of you know, I am counting down to Wednesday, June the 28th, when I will dance on stage with the Dream Boys, who say that they're the most famous male strippers in the UK. I'm going to do 3 routines on the night, and one of them will be a solo. And I met the lads earlier to learn some of the moves. I'm going to be in Bromley in Kent. It's just over 5 weeks' time. I've had to get down from 15 stone 8, which, believe it or not, was my fighting weight not so long ago. I won't quite tell you what I am now, but I'll reveal all in a couple of days. But I've got to do these routines. I am, of course, doing it to raise money for the mental health charity Mind, because, sadly, every single day in this country, around 12 men take their own lives. And suicide, believe it or not, is the single biggest killer of men under the age of 45. And the fundraiser for that is justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys, which was just on your screen a moment ago. There we go, justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. And thank you to all of your wonderful donations. We have now raised £45,000, 721 quid as well. I'm setting the target of 50 grand. I know that things are a bit tight at the moment and, you know, people can't always delve into their finances. I just want you to know that even just a couple of quid gets through to me as well. And it really is absolutely means the world, really, to see people digging deep. And can I just highlight a couple of people quickly on this? Because we've had Mark, who got in touch. He said, "Patrick, you're a legend, thank you." He says, "I lost my brother to suicide 9 years ago this week, and not a day goes by without thinking about him and his hidden suffering. He was everyone's rock, but who knew?" Now, Mark thankfully gave 10 quid Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that we're trying to stop, OK? I am, for what it's worth, humiliating myself on stage for the privilege of it, but if we can save some lives together, that would be massively appreciated. It's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys, and if we can hit that 50k mark, fingers crossed, that's a lot of help for a lot of people. But I'll get off my soapbox now anyway, there we go. Right, well, look, I've got a lot more coming your way throughout the course of this show, of course. I'm going to be talking about Home Secretary Suella Braverman. She says that she's confident she did nothing untoward as the row intensifies of her handling over the speeding offence. I'm going to move this story on. I'm going to ask pretty simply, OK? Can Rishi Sunak afford to lose Suella? I'm pretty sure she's the only thing standing in the way of a complete and utter public rebellion, as those immigration figures are an absolute shocker. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power.
Right, OK, welcome back, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. I've got a rip-roaring final hour of this show. Now, look, this drama is hotting up about Suella Braverman. Lots of people think that this is just some kind of civil service stitcher, but regardless of that, can Rishi Sunak actually afford to let go of Suella Braverman in light of this next story because we are expecting rocketing levels of immigration, both legal and illegal, to be announced on Thursday. She is the Home Secretary. She has at least talked a good game on this. The public have voted consistently now for decades for parties that have vowed to reduce migration, and it hasn't happened. If Rishi Sunak loses a woman who's going to actually stand up and talk about it passionately and strongly, is that a terrible look for him? Would that be curtains for Rishi? Another story for us now. I am going to be talking as well to Wes Streeting, who is the Shadow Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. He's going to be live with me right here on GB News, just responding to Keir Starmer's NHS plan. No doubt he'll probably want to comment on Suella Braverman as well. And finally, this news dropped not long before I came to air today, which is that police are going to be searching a reservoir in Portugal in the latest attempt to find Madeleine McCann. I will have a lot more info on the specifics of that very shortly. Patrick Christys on GB News. OK, get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.com. Just remember, we've changed to a .com on that email address. I'll go to the inbox very, very shortly. Can Rishi afford to let Suella go? That's what I really want to know from you today. gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, though, headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thanks very much indeed. Our top headlines this hour. Police investigating the disappearance of Madeleine McCann are reportedly set to launch a major search in Portugal. A remote reservoir on the Algarve will be the main focus. It's about 30 miles from the resort in Praia de Luz, where Madeleine went missing in 2007. The main suspect in the case, Christian B., used to visit the area. He's currently in jail in Germany for 5 sexual offences committed in Portugal between the year 2000 and 2017. The search is due to start tomorrow and is expected to last 2 days. Here, the Home Secretary says she's confident there was nothing untoward in the way she handled a speeding offence. Suella Braverman is accused of asking for a private speed awareness course to be arranged after she was caught speeding last year. If it's true, it could be a possible breach of the ministerial code. The Prime Minister has spoken to his ethics advisor, but it's understood that no formal inquiry has been launched. Earlier, the Home Secretary didn't deny asking civil servants for assistance.
Last summer, I was speeding. I regret that. I paid the fine and I took the points. But we're focused now on delivering for the British people and working for them.
Did you ask civil servants to put you on a one-on-one speeding course?
In relation to the process, I'm focused on delivering for the British people, do my job as Home Secretary. What I will say is that, in my view, I'm confident that nothing untoward has happened.
Well, the Shadow Public Health Minister Andrew Gwynne says Suella Braverman must resign.
Look, I've got real frustration here about this because at a time of a cost of living crisis that people want real answers to, at the time that our NHS is on its knees and needs fixing, we're here yet again talking about another Tory minister who has sought to bend the rules, play the system for their own advantage. Of course, she needs to face an ethics advisor. I would go further. I think Rishi Sunak needs to show some leadership and show her the door.
Well, Labour has warned that the NHS won't survive 5 more years of a Conservative government. Setting out his vision for the health service, Sir Keir Starmer promised to get the NHS back on its feet if his party won the next election. He pledged to reduce NHS waiting lists, he committed to hitting the 4-hour A&E target and improve ambulance response times.
At the next election, the NHS is on the line. The Conservative Party that's brought it to its knees will put it in the ground. But mark my words, if all we do in the Labour Party is to place the NHS on a pedestal and leave it there, that's not good enough either. We've got to fix the fundamentals, renew its purpose, make it fit for the future.
Now, nearly a third of the young survivors of the Manchester Arena bombing received no professional support, with a report finding their experiences weren't validated by adults in positions of care. 22 people were killed when a suicide bomber detonated his device at the Ariana Grande concert 6 years ago. The Be the Difference report showed 3/4 of children at the event were mentally affected by the attack, but professional support simply wasn't offered to 4 in 10 of them. Russia's Wagner group of mercenaries has announced plans to leave Ukraine's eastern city of Bakhmut. The group's founder says forces will retreat from the 25th of May until the 1st of June. That's after Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky dismissed claims by the paramilitary organisation that it had already successfully taken the city. Here, there's a warning over a number of new sophisticated scams going round. Consumer group Which says 4 are doing the rounds at the moment, and they include PayPal and missing person appeals, fraudulent app alerts. Well, the government plans to work with Ofcom to use new technology to reduce the number of scams. And finally, a bus driver from Devon has cashed in a £1 million prize from a lottery scratch card. Steve Goodwin picked up the winning Bank the Cash ticket from a co-op shop in South Devon whilst he was waiting for a kebab. The lucky winner says he'll use the money to buy a house and take a few holidays, but he plans to keep on working. You can get more on all of those stories by heading to our website, gbnews.com.
Right, loads to go through, so let's get cracking. And the big question is this: is the end of the road very, very close for our Home Secretary, Suella Braverman? I would hate to think so, but given the way that things have gone in the past, I mean, you wouldn't rule it out, would you? Suella Braverman is under mounting pressure over her handling of a speeding offence. Her future lies in the hands of the Prime Minister, who will probably try to palm it off on some kind of independent inquiry. But Rishi Sunak told MPs earlier that he would update on any response to the allegations in due course. Now, this is important, OK? So it's been reported that Suella Braverman asked officials to try to arrange a private speed awareness course for her rather than take penalty points on her driving licence, right? But that in itself is quite a misleading sentence, because anyone who takes a speed awareness course is trying to avoid getting points on your licence. That's the point of a speed awareness course. So these headlines of Home Secretary tries to avoid, they say, well, that's what everyone does whenever they do it. And can anybody else see maybe why she might want to try to do it privately as opposed to go through a quite public speed awareness course? Maybe she was busy trying to stop the boats or stop things to do with illegal migration. She says that she's confident that nothing untoward has happened.
Well, first and foremost, I'm focused on the priorities for the British people as Home Secretary. That's cutting serious crime with more police officers, that's standing up for victims of child sexual abuse, it's about stopping the boats, and I'm not going to take a backward step from working on those issues. In relation to your question, last summer I was speeding, I regret that. I paid the fine and I took the points. But we're focused now on delivering for the British people and working for them.
Did you ask civil servants to put you on a one-on-one speeding course?
In relation to the process, I'm focused on delivering for the British people, do my job as Home Secretary. What I will say is that, in my view, I'm confident that nothing untoward has happened.
Would you welcome an investigation into this? Have you spoken to the Prime Minister? Would you welcome one?
As I said, I'm focused on working as Home Secretary, that's why I'm here. I've met with victims today. I'm making a big announcement today. I'd appreciate the focus on an announcement which is standing up for victims and survivors. In relation to the speeding ticket and my fine and points, I'm very confident nothing.
Just very finally on this, Prime Minister, but this is really important because you've broken rules before, you've had a resign over breaking the ministerial code, you've admitted now to breaking or having a speeding fine, you've accused of breaking the code for a second time. How good a look is it for a senior politician, one of the most senior politicians in the country, to be viewed as a constant rule breaker?
I got a speeding ticket, I paid the fine, I took the points. In my view, nothing untoward has happened. Thank you.
I think we're operating in an incredibly grey area here now. Is there not a pattern emerging of right-wing, anti-mass migration, pro-Brexit government ministers and indeed one Prime Minister who have fallen foul of relentless civil service leaks? It is worth noting that in the case of Suella Braverman, on Thursday, and we will be doing a big migration special on this very show on Thursday. Watch this space for more detail. We've got some exciting plans for that. We are clearly expecting it to be an absolute catastrophe for the government, and rumoured net migration of around the 700,000 mark. We've also got illegal migration figures that will drop, which by definition will be pretty catastrophic as well, one would imagine. So Suella Braverman then tub-thumping at a right-wing national conservatism conference was seen by many as some kind of veiled, thinly veiled leadership pitch. So she may well now have made enemies both within the civil service and potentially at the heart of Downing Street as well. But when you see leak after leak after leak after leak, I was speaking earlier on to the deputy head of one of the main civil service unions, the FDA, who did confirm to me that it is against the civil service code to be leaking what ministers are telling you to the press, if indeed that is what's happened. And I don't know about you, but when you look at the pattern of people who've been briefed against, it isn't doing much to dispel this quotes-unquote myth that there may be some kind of agenda in the civil service. Joining me now from Westminster is Associate Political Editor of the Daily Telegraph, Christopher Hope. Christopher, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. I am struggling to work out why this is so serious. Home Secretary gets speeding ticket, asked whether or not she can do a private speed awareness course. She's told no. She pays the fine and takes the point on her licence. What's the problem?
The problem is that she may have asked civil servants to help her with her personal matter. It's like your boss may be asking you to help out with his or her speeding ticket, and that's the problem. As I understand it from her friends, she was, of course, Attorney General when she got these speeding points. Then she became Home Secretary. She had, and she still does have, of course, security around her. She was wondering how that could work and whether she'd have a one-on-one speeding course. And she maybe asked civil servants about that, if that's what happened. And that's the problem, because you can't really get civil servants involved. And then a special advisor, a political person, came in and sorted it out. It does seem to me, if you look at the other stories around, that she may have, a story in The Guardian over the weekend, that she may have missed a vote on her flagship small boats policy, that there was an attempt to try and undermine her in this week of all weeks, when we're going to see net migration hitting maybe 700,000 on Thursday. And I can see why there's a feeling amongst our friends that the so-called blob, Patrick, is out to get her, and that's what's driving this concern about her at the moment.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious to assume that there's some kind of anti-Suella Braverman witch hunt, isn't there? My concern would be whether or not Rishi Sunak could afford to get rid of her. At least Suella Braverman talks a very good game and appeals to, frankly, the kind of policies that people have voted for consistently for decades now when it comes to reducing net migration. If Rishi Sunak parts company with her, do you think that's the straw that breaks the camel's back?
I think it's a problem. I think she exists there as a defence against this kind of criticism. She is certainly very strong on the right like her. She was their candidate in the leadership elections last year. Immigration polls third on the list behind the economy and the health service, and that's why it matters so much. I think Sunak, though, is in some trouble already. He said that he wants net migration to come down below 500,000. That was a big number. That's the annual figure when he became Prime Minister in October. Well, if it's now 700,000, he needs a Home Secretary who believes in bringing down migration, and there's fewer, more committed people than Suella Braverman. So I think that arguably, politically, Sunak needs her there, and that's why I think this will blow over.
Christopher, when I'm looking at this now and I'm seeing Dominic Raab, who said that he had a trial by media where false accusations were leaked by presumably the civil service against him, one involving a tomato, apparently. He then went on to lose his job despite not, as far as I can tell, shouting or swearing at anybody and having to put up with a man who nearly gave Gibraltar back to the Spanish. Then we've got Boris Johnson, who had leak after leak after leak. All right, didn't cover himself in glory at times, that's fair to say, but still. And then we've got Suella Braverman now as well. There is a pattern emerging, is there not, of right-wing, anti-mass migration, pro-Brexit people in high office falling out with the civil service and being leaked against in the press. And should there not be more of a focus as to the civil service leaking things as much as there is about the minute detail of the ministerial code?
Well, as you said, it is against the civil service code to leak against ministers. You've collected some names there: Raab, Johnson, Braverman, they're on the right of centre of the party, and there's a feeling, isn't there, that the so-called blob, to use that expression, this maybe Remain bias group are unhappy about that. There's no actual evidence of this. It's certainly how it feels, and I think there's a sense maybe that this government has got 18 months to go, and the civil service, I mean, they are delivering what they are told to do. But if you just look at this week on Wednesday, we're looking at the retained EU law bill. 4,000 EU measures were meant to go, just 600 are going. Now, if you talk to people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, obviously GBNews host, he'll say that there was no attempt to get this done quickly because the civil service are unhappy about the pace of change being pushed by the right of centre ministers, and maybe that's what's happening. But it's hard to find a smoking gun on this, Patrick.
Yeah, it is indeed. Look, Christopher, thank you very much, as ever. It's Christopher Hope there, who is the associate political editor, no doubt, of the Daily Telegraph. I've been asking you about this all show, and I'm going to go to the inbox very, very shortly. gbviews@gbnews.com. Remember, that's the new email address there. Look, does this not smell a little bit like a Suella witch hunt? I can't help but wonder whether or not it potentially is yet again. The names are stacking up, aren't they, here? Rishi Sunak has been speaking in the House of Commons this afternoon, though. He was asked how he'll handle the situation regarding allegations that Suella Braverman has broken the ministerial code.
I've always been clear that where issues like this are raised, they should be dealt with properly and they should be dealt with professionally. Since I've returned from the G7, I have been receiving information on the issues raised. I have met with both the independent advisor and the Home Secretary. I've asked for further information, and I'll update on the appropriate course of action in due course.
Yeah, look, well, you heard from Christopher Hope there. His gut feeling is that this will all blow over. But you just have to look at the headlines. Like I said before, you know, the headlines come out. Home Secretary tries to dodge penalty points on licence and a fine. Well, that is what a speed awareness course is. And it is also important to look at this breakdown in the ministerial code here and this grey area now between getting an individual involved in your own personal business and frankly, just helping them do your job. So if you say to them, well, look, I need to, just get this sorted out for me so that I can continue to do my job as a Minister of State, as a Secretary of State, does that include things like, oh, can you just get me a pizza? Or can you get me a coffee because I'm just working late in the office right now? Is that them getting involved in their personal business? I don't know. It just seems like a remarkably grey area. And you do tend to see this now, don't you, with a lot of the kind of pro-Brexit MPs. But moving on, there's been a major development in the Madeleine McCann case. Portuguese police are going to carry out new searches in the Algarve, near where the little girl went missing 16 years ago. Local media reports that the reservoir near Silves, about 50 kilometres from Praia de Luz, was visited by the main suspect in the disappearance, who has been named as Christian B. The convicted child abuser and drug dealer has not been charged and denies any involvement in the case. I'm joined now by Charlie Hedges, who's the former head of the Missing Children's Unit at the National Crime Agency. Charlie, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. What do you think this new development means, really? They're going to be searching a reservoir and some woodland around it. They clearly feel as though they've got some good info.
Well, it clearly means that the case is still live. They're still paying an active interest in what's going on and paying heed to new developments. And as far as we can see, and we don't have any direct information about what's happening, it appears to come from the German prosecutor who are investigating Christian B. So the lake has been searched before, but these are incredibly difficult areas to search effectively. So it'll be interesting to see how things unfold over the next few days.
You, of course, are the head of the Missing Children's Unit at the National Crime Agency. What do you think is the main reason behind why the Madeleine McCann search has been given much more precedence, resources, public awareness than the thousands of missing children that disappear every year?
Yes, this is an interesting question, and currently the latest data from the National Crime Agency is that there are in excess of 11,000 unsolved cases in the UK. And it is a question that I ask sometimes as to why one particular case it gets this amount of funding when others don't. Certainly wouldn't want to take away from the McCann case that it needs urgent investigation, but there are a huge number that don't get the same level of attention.
Why do you think this has got so much attention? Here we are, I think I'm right in saying 16 years on, I think that's what it is now, 16 years on. And, you know, whenever there's a development, it's literally headline news.
Well, it should be taken forward, but it's a case that has caught the public imagination and always gets good media attention. We've seen a few others over the years. Recently, we saw Nicola Bulley. A few years before that, we saw April Jones and various other cases. It's a question that taxes us a lot. To why does that particular case get the attention? Clearly, Madeleine's parents are keen to keep it in the media and keep on pushing it forwards. It just seems to capture the public imagination. But I can't give you a definitive answer as to why this over other cases.
Absolutely, and like you've pointed out already, this is essentially being led by the German police, who I was speaking to a guy earlier on who was out there at the scene when the Madeleine McCann case first erupted, as it were, and he said that the German police are often very cautious, very conservative when it comes to the amount of information that they release. They are adamant that they've got their guy, OK? They are absolutely adamant about it. He, of course, denies any involvement in it. This, I think, should be a point of hope, a beacon of hope for Maddie's parents, though. I mean, the German police are acting on what they believe is incredibly credible intelligence here from, well, let's be honest, the man they think has done something unspeakable to Madeleine.
Yes, I think it is a good source. Must also bear in mind it might be that they need to be able to eliminate something from their inquiries as well as move forward. But I don't want to take away from the positive actions that are happening here. I think it's great for Kate and Jerry that more action is continuing to take forward. As they said on the anniversary, they want to keep this case alive, and we should be keeping it alive. But at the same time, we must also recognise that it may actually not give us a solution.
OK, look, thank you very much. No doubt, because this search, I believe, begins in earnest tomorrow and will rumble on, presumably, for a few days. So, no doubt I will chat to you again at some point. But thank you very much for your time today. It's Charlie Hedges there, is the former head of the Missing Children's Unit at the National Crime Agency. Like I said, that search is due to start tomorrow, where officers from Portuguese authorities and German authorities are going to be searching a reservoir and some woodland around it in Portugal, near Praia de Luz, where Madeleine McCann went missing around 16 years ago. We, of course, will bring you any updates on that. Could this finally be the answer to one of the world's greatest mysteries, frankly? But there we go. Look, loads more on that story on our website right now. Simply head to gbnews.com. You will find the very best analysis and opinion, as well as the latest breaking news. But get a load of this. Net migration figures for 2022, they're coming out on Thursday. We're doing a big migration special. I'll give you some info about what exactly we're doing on that in tomorrow's show as well. We are going big on it. They could top 700,000. That's just the legal side of it. But are we too reliant on immigration? We've had a Tory MP coming out today saying, yeah, we need more. We need more. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. This very show will be a migration special on Thursday. It's the day that the net migration figures for last year announced. They could well top 700,000. They could well top 1 million. The Prime Minister has said that he's committed to reducing net migration, but interestingly, he hasn't set a target and he's distanced himself from previous targets. But this piqued my interest earlier. Today, Tory MP David Simmons said this. You know, by the way, he's the chair of the all-party parliamentary group on migration. He said we need more immigration to fill job vacancies. It's got me wondering, are we too reliant on immigration? OK, it seems like every single sector, supposedly, would crumble without it, and yet every single sector is still desperate for workers, despite the fact that we've got around 700,000, a figure of net migration. I'm joined now by Conservative MP for South Thanet. It's Craig McKinley. Craig, thank you very much. Are we too reliant on migration?
It seems to be, to me, it's the easy call. We've got shortages. Call for more migration. And the figures to me that really stand out is that we've got over 5 million people on a form of working age benefit. We've got 1.1 million jobs unfilled, still got those vacancies. Surely one would have thought you'd match those that have got more hours spare whilst on a form of benefit, filling those jobs that are obviously available. Many of those are more unskilled, and I can't imagine they can't be filled. There will be situations where we do need skilled workers, and they may not obviously be available in the market, and then we can have the discussion as to whether those routes should be available for skilled migrants from abroad. But the problem we've got is that virtually the entirety of all jobs that are available are now potentially advertised for anybody in the world, because the salary limits are now so low, and they haven't gone up since 2012. I mean, the salary level for general application for any job is a little over 26,000, and that's been reduced further for some unskilled jobs to 21,000. So it's virtually Britain is open to the world now.
It is open to the world. Craig, can I just?
The normal Joe. When were we asked? When was the vote? Because I don't remember it. When we were asked, are we willing or able to support this level of migration? Now, I'm not fussed about people, not fussed about that at all. What I'm fussed about is housing. I'm fussed about access to education. I'm fussed about those other public services. And I just cannot see that we can manage these numbers on a regular annual basis.
No, exactly. And Craig, as well, one of the things that stands out for me is you did ask there about when was the... I believe we've lost Craig, unfortunately, but I'll just have a chat to you at home, why not? We were asked, Craig said then, when were we asked about this level of migration? OK, and the answer is we weren't. But when were we asked whether or not we wanted a level a bit like this level of migration? And we've been asked at every single general election and during the Brexit vote, haven't we? Every single time for the last 20 or 30 years. And every single time the British public has come out and said we want a limit on the amount of net migration and tighter controls on illegal migration. Every single time. And every single time, clearly, our politicians have not listened to the people. They've essentially lied to them. And when these figures drop, which I suspect they will on Thursday, and they will be pretty devastating, and you look at the amount of net migration and you look at the illegal migration as well, could this finally be the turning point where the public decide that they've had enough? Craig, I'll bring you back in. Thank you very much, Craig McKinley, MP for South Thanet. Craig, when these figures drop on Thursday, the public have time and time again voted against numbers like these. Time and time again, they have been lied to. Will this not be the straw that breaks the camel's back?
I think last year was likely to be an unusual year because of up to 200,000 Ukrainians.
OK, all right. Craig McKinley there, unfortunately, has got a bad signal, so we can't go to him. But there we go. Look, make sure that you keep your eyes and ears peeled because we will be live here on Thursday throughout the course of the day as we reveal the net migration figures and indeed the illegal migration figures as well. And this really will be the place to be for all of that. I've got lots more to come between now and 6 o'clock. On the 6th anniversary of the Manchester Arena bombing, I will ask just how great is the risk of another terror attack from Islamist extremists. It's also the 10th anniversary, of course, of the slaughter, the murder of Lee Rigby, Fusilier Lee Rigby, on the streets of Britain. And there are some very strong words from Sir Keir Starmer on the future of the NHS. I will be talking to Wes Streeting, who is Labour's Shadow Health and Social Care Minister, live on this show in a matter of minutes. So make sure that you stay tuned for all of that. But right now, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. A new major search for Madeleine McCann will begin tomorrow. Portuguese police will search a remote reservoir on the Algarve, which the main suspect in the case used to frequent. The area is about 30 miles from the resort in Praia de Luz, where Madeleine first went missing 16 years ago. The search is expected to last 2 days. Also in the news today, the Home Secretary says she's confident there was nothing untoward in the way she handled a speeding offence. Suella Braverman is under pressure over a possible breach of the ministerial code following claims she asked for help in arranging a private speed awareness course. The Prime Minister has spoken to his ethics advisor about the matter, but no inquiry's been launched. Speaking for the first time about the row, the Home Secretary didn't deny asking civil servants for assistance.
Last summer, I was speeding. I regret that. I paid the fine and I took the points. But we're focused now on delivering for the British people and working for them.
Did you ask civil servants to put you on a one-on-one speeding course?
In relation to the process, I'm focused on delivering for the British people, do my job as Home Secretary. What I will say is that, in my view, I'm confident that nothing untoward has happened.
Labour's been warning the NHS won't survive another Conservative government setting out his vision for the health service. Sir Keir Starmer promised that the NHS would be back on its feet if he won the next election. He also said A&E wait times and ambulance response times would be hit by 2030 under his watch. You can get more on all those stories by heading to our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
A quick snapshot of today's markets for you. The pound will buy you $1.2426 and €1.1496 euros. The price of gold is £1,588 and 56 pence an ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed today at 7,770 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
OK, just a little reminder that in just a few moments' time I am due to be talking with Wes Streeting, who is the Shadow Health and Social Care Minister for the Labour Party, clearly in relation to Keir Starmer's big NHS plans. So I'll be putting some of those plans from Keir Starmer to him. We'll be having a chat about that. I would imagine he'd probably want to comment on Suella Braverman as well. But today is the 6th anniversary of the suicide bombing in which 22 people were killed in the Manchester arena. The attack happened at the end of an Ariana Grande concert, and loads of kids were amongst those victims as well. A new report says that many of those people who survived are yet to receive psychological help, which is desperately upsetting. But today is also the 10th anniversary of another devastating attack that caused utter revulsion and, again, in my view, gets forgotten about all too often, and that is the brutal murder of Fusilier Lee Rigby in broad daylight in Woolwich by two vile Islamist extremists. But have we actually learned any lessons from the death of Lee Rigby and this Manchester arena bombing? I ask this because when I look around now, we've got an open door policy pretty much in the channel, which is a massive security risk. We've let in a whole host of returning ISIS fighters from Syria and countries like that. We are letting people out of prisons for terror offences very, very early on after marginal sentences. And then I look around as well and I think, you know, realistically, are we learning the lessons to protect ourselves from these kind of attacks happening again? I spoke to counter-terrorism expert Wazir earlier. Here's what he had to say.
Well, I think we have learnt some lessons, and I think we're going to learn more lessons as a result of us getting more cognizant as the threat evolves. What we need to do is we need to stay ahead of the threat as it evolves, because these terrorists are looking to destabilise the West, and we need to be doing everything that we can. Now, obviously, we are aware that, for example, the prison is a hotbed now for terrorists or potential terrorists to be recruited and to actually carry out terrorist attacks. Now that we know that that's taking place, we need to be able to put measures in place to prevent that from happening. Of course, we can't prevent everything from happening, but when we do know a risk is posed, then we need to be taking those measures to be able to deal with it. When we've got people coming in illegally from across the pond, we don't know who they are, we don't know what threat they're going to pose in the future, and we need to really seriously deal with them in a proportionate way, in a legal way, so that we can certainly deal with any potential threat that they do end up posing.
Yeah, I just really am absolutely staggered about our response. I'll just chat about this for 1 second. I am actually really staggered about our response to this. I mean, Salman Abidi's brother was allowed to flee the country, OK? And then we've also got the likes of the murderers of Lee Rigby, you know, still in prison, being given various different luxuries. And we are, in my view anyway, not doing enough to try to make sure that stuff like this doesn't happen again. And there is a little bit of a kind of out of sight, out of mind, isn't there, when it comes to that? Get your emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. But now I'm going to talk about this because there are some very strong words from Sir Keir Starmer, who says that the NHS will not survive another 5 years under the Conservative Party. Starmer promised that Labour would make the NHS fit for the future if they won the next general election. He said they'd set new targets for ambulance response times, cancer diagnosis, cutting deaths from cardiovascular disease as well. And I'm very pleased to be joined now by the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. Wes, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. When I look at some of the language that's been used by Keir Starmer here about bringing care closer to home, for example, we've heard about giving the patients more control. This is exactly the same language, with respect, Wes, that we have heard now for years from anyone who's remotely close to the NHS. What's different?
Yeah, I mean, I can understand why after years of broken promises from the Conservatives, people are cynical. That's why the plan today that Keir set out is really important, because even if the NHS weren't in the biggest crisis in its history, which it is, even if the public finances weren't in the mess which they are, the NHS would still need to change in order to meet the needs of Britain today and into the future, not Britain as it was back in 1948 when the NHS was founded. And that needs three big shifts from a focus on hospital care, to better community services, whether that's general practice, access to pharmacy, new mental health hubs Labour's committed to, or indeed supporting people's homes, which we'd support through greater investment in district nursing. We also need a shift from analogue to digital. We've got amazing life sciences and technology in this country which can offer groundbreaking changes in the way that we treat, diagnose, prevent illness. And thirdly, we've got to do better in terms of the health of the nation and tackling the grotesque inequalities that means that people can die almost 2 decades earlier if they're from a poorer part of the north of England than if they're in a wealthier, leafier part of the southeast. And that just can't be right in today's day and age.
How do you pay for this?
Well, we've committed to the biggest expansion of NHS staff in history, funded by abolishing the non-dom tax status. Right. And as Keir said today, the NHS does require investment, but also reform. And we're being so careful and cautious as a party in terms of the promises we make, because we know that people out there are really cynical about pledges and promises and whether they can be afforded. That's why any pledge we make, we say how much it will cost, where it will come from, and when people...
I get that, Wes, but a lot of people... Yeah, I do understand that, but a lot of the time, the answer to how much it will cost and where that money will come from is non-dom status. And you are, as far as I can tell, relying on abolishing the non-dom status to fund things in education, the health service, when it comes to things like green energy as well. How much will you make...
only two things. Two things.
That was 3 things.
Just 2 things, right? So abolishing the non-dom tax status raises just over £3 billion. Yeah. 1.6 goes to the biggest expansion of NHS staff in history, and the rest goes to primary school breakfast clubs in every school so that kids start the day with hungry minds, not hungry bellies. That's it. That's where the non-dom money goes, and there are no other pledges funded from
no
that
other
pot.
Good, right, well, you've heard it. You have heard it here. Good, you've heard it here, because I've been. I do interview a lot of Labour people, and it does seem like everything is non-dominated. So I'm very pleased about this, Wes. Thank you very, very much. But look, can I ask? There was a little sneaky little line in what Keir Starmer was saying, which made me wonder: is he opening the door for some kind of replication of a foreign health service? There was a talk about looking internationally and seeing how other countries are doing it better than us. OK. What are those countries? What kind of systems are we talking about here? I couldn't help but wonder whether there was a little nudge in the direction of some form of privatisation, which, of course, one would imagine the Labour Party will be dedicated.
Oh, no, absolutely not. No, that's not the answer. And similarly, I mean, I know we sometimes get Conservatives saying maybe we should charge for NHS services. The problem with the NHS isn't that it's free at the point of use. That's what, like when I went through my kidney cancer a couple of years ago, the one thing I didn't have to worry about was the bill. And I would die in a ditch to save that precious principle of free at the point of use public service. That's really important. Where we are looking, whether it's at, continental European countries who do a lot more in primary care and community services, they do a lot more scans and diagnostic work in the community. They've got much better primary care and general practice than we do. Or whether it's looking at Singapore or Israel and what they're doing in terms of life sciences and technology. I don't think there's one kind of model out there that we can just sort of wholesale lift up and plant into the NHS. What there are areas of excellence and best practice in other parts of the world that deliver much better outcomes than we do here, and we want to learn from that. But the fundamental principles of the NHS, free at the point of use, as far as we're concerned, are untouchable, and that's what makes the NHS worth fighting for.
OK, all right. Presumably you will be giving a whopping great big pay rise to NHS workers to make it a more palatable working environment for them.
We'll do what we can when we can. I ask people to judge us on our record. When we were last in government, we actually delivered pay rises year after year and actually full pay restoration compared to what had happened under the Conservatives previously. But we were able to do that because we got the economy growing. And so I've got a lot of time for nurses and junior doctors and what they're saying about the pressure they feel in their pockets, as well as the pressures they're under in the workplace. And I'll do everything I can to sit down, negotiate with them, work with them, and do as much as we can, as fast as we can. But I have been honest with them, like when they've asked for things like the 35% pay rise or 19.5%, I've had to be honest and say, I wouldn't be able to deliver that overnight. I wish it were possible, but the public finances are in a mess, and I'm not going to lead you up the path before before an election and then let you down after an election. So we are being careful about the promises we make. We're asking people to judge us on our record.
Can I just on that judging on your
make all the difference.
Yeah, on that judging on your record thing, then Wes, is it not slightly unfortunate for you that the NHS in Wales is run under a Labour government and that is absolutely on its knees?
I don't deny that right across the UK, in all four corners, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and England, the NHS is in dire straits. A lot of that is because, frankly, for more than a decade, we had underinvestment with the Conservatives, and that does flow through to the choices that governments in different parts of the United Kingdom are able to make. I think a Labour government in Westminster would create a rising tide that would lift all ships, and we'll be able to work in partnership right across the UK to support health improvement in every part of the UK. Obviously, health is devolved to Wales and Scotland, Northern Ireland, but I think all of them would be better off under a Labour government. And, you know, the SNP hate to admit this, but they know they'd be better off under a Labour government, even if we wouldn't touch them with a barge pole.
OK, look, very quickly, because I'm going to get shouted at, and I know you've given us a bit of your time. I just wanted to clarify one thing, if that's all right. This non-dom thing, to the 1.6 billion that you're saying it would raise for our NHS, abolishing the non-dom status, what do you do a couple of years later when all of those non-doms have left this country entirely and they're not paying in anymore?
So I don't think that's going to be the case, and we based our assumptions not on our own research, but on independent research conducted by academics in London and in Warwick. And we're confident that this would generate the revenues that we need. And look, there's a very high-profile example of a non-dom in Number 10 who pays their taxes here now, but they didn't leave the country, and I don't think other non-doms would, because for all the challenges we've got in Britain, this is still a great place to live, a great place to work, and a great place to do business. It could be so much better, and that's at the heart of Labour's plans for Britain.
Wes, massively appreciate your time. Thank you very, very much. Wes Streeting there is the Shadow Health Secretary. Right, well, lots to get into there. We can ruminate on that a little bit later, but there is a warning over a growing number of sophisticated scams which target users of online dating sites, apparently. Victims can be left tens of thousands out of pocket. Shocking cases this. We're giving you some of the key warnings to look out for to make sure that you keep the money in your pocket. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back. Now, I've got time for this just about. A warning is being issued over a number of new sophisticated scams. Consumer group Which says at least 4 are doing the rounds, and we wanted to bring this to you to save you and your loved ones a bit of money. They include fake PayPal and missing person appeals, fraudulent app alerts, and believe it or not, pig butchering, which one would have thought was a niche market, but there we go, which was given its name because fraudsters fatten up the victim by forming a romantic connection before executing the financial part of the scam. Bit grim. Our next guest this evening is an unfortunate victim of romance fraud, and joining us now from Scotland is Sue Mitchell. Sue, thank you very much, and thank you for being brave enough to talk out. I'm very sorry we're so pressed for time. You can blame West Streeting, all right? So remember that next time you go and vote. But, Sue, what happened to you, Sue?
I got a contact from a gentleman claiming to be in America, based on some photos that I'd posted online on Facebook on a public site. Basically, he was wanting to travel to Scotland, and he was interested in whether I could give him some tips on where to come to when he came on his visit. OK, and did he then try to ask for a bit of money? What was the kind of progression here towards you, unfortunately, I believe, losing some money? Is that right? Yeah, basically, it went over 16 months, and we chatted and we became friends, and he told me about his life and his job. And after probably 10 days, he was going to go working on an oil rig out in the Gulf of Mexico. He lived in New Jersey, he claimed at the time. And whilst he was away, he had problem after problem after problem, basically, and an accident as well. But all the time we were developing our relationship.
Right. And he was then asking you for quite a lot of money, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was a small amount to start with. He indicated that the day after that he got onto the oil rig, he'd forgotten to pack a card that he needed to run his operation with, his computer program, his work, basically, from the computer there. And he'd forgotten to pack the card, and so could I just buy him a £50 Google Play card so that he could, actually do the work. He was only meant to be there for 4 weeks, so it was to set up the job.
And in the end, my notes here say that you lost about £35,000. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, about 7 payments, small amounts first, £1,095, the biggest one being £12,000, a £6,500 for an accident that he had while he was on the rig, and various other machinery that failed whilst he was away.
Well, Sue, can I ask you a quick favour? And can I ask if it's all right for you to come back on and talk to me a bit more about this? Because we've been so pressed for time here, because we had a surprise interaction with the Shadow Health Minister for the Labour Party, which I did have to squeeze in. But I'd love to have you back on, Sue, and talk in a bit more detail, because I think your story is going to help millions of people out there keep hold of some of their money and not fall victim to those vile fraudsters. That's Sue Mitchell there, who's a romance fraud victim. That is it for me today, ladies and gentlemen. I will be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Jubes & Co follows very, very shortly with Michelle Dewberry. See you in a tick.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with your GB News forecast. It's a fine spring day out there for most of us. Warm, sunny spells continuing during the rest of the afternoon with clear spells overnight. High pressure is well and truly in charge of our weather at the moment. That's keeping weather systems at bay, although a few weak weather fronts will just topple over the top of that high to bring some cloud and some patchy rain into the far north. The first area clearing away into the evening. 1 or 2 light showers into the far northwest then. But otherwise, for much of the UK, it's clear spells continuing. And under those clear skies, with light winds and relatively low humidities, temperatures will fall away. I think in some of the urban areas, 10 or 11 Celsius, but in sheltered spots, particularly in the north, as low as 2 to 4 Celsius. So a cool start to Tuesday, but it will soon warm up with plenty more sunshine to come up and down the country. Northern and Western Scotland, Northern Ireland will see thicker cloud arriving during Tuesday morning, and that spreads to the rest of Scotland into parts of Northern England by the afternoon. There'll also be a bit more cloud further south compared with today. As a result, it will be a touch cooler, but still 20 to 22 Celsius possible in the south, 18 to 20 further north. An area of light and patchy rain crosses northern Scotland, pushing through Shetland during the evening and then clearing away. So most places dry then by the early hours of Wednesday. Clear spells once again in the east and the south, and as a result, temperatures again falling away into the single figures. So not a particularly warm night to come, and it will be a fresh start to Wednesday, but once more, plenty of sunshine. More sunshine, I think, for England and Wales, eastern Scotland compared with Tuesday. And it'll be a bit warmer for eastern Scotland in particular because of a change in the wind direction. 20 Celsius possible here. But outbreaks of light rain will affect the north and west of Scotland. Elsewhere, plenty more sunshine to come on Thursday and into Friday.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories.